So with this now inclusion of Absolute Superman, we now finally complete the DC's trinity of all different and all new superhero origins. Because just like with Absolute Batman and Absolute Wonder Woman, Absolute Superman takes everything about Superman and flips it on its head, changing everything completely. So of course, naturally, we start off on Krypton. Krypton in the recent past. And now this Krypton is very different but very interesting. Because while yes, it still has that crystallized look a lot of Kryptons have, this one is a lot more dark and sinister looking. No doubt an influence from Darkseid himself, as he did create this entire universe from the events of DC All In, but in short, this Darkseid created universe, everything is twisted compared to the prime DC Earth. But also, like most versions of Krypton, the planet is still being abused and ran dry by the ruling or Science League class of Krypton, because in their pursuit of science and furthering Krypton, they run the planet dry of its resources, no matter the cost, all in the name of progress. They were the most veneered minds on the planet, but two very interesting people weren't a part of them. No, here in the Absolute Universe, Superman's parents, Jor-El and Lara, are actually farmers on Krypton, which of course is usually a role that his Earth parents, the Kents, play. Instead, we also see here on Krypton, his parents are hard-working farmers. Another thing that is pretty interesting and frankly weird, we learn a bit about the lore of Krypton. How Lara, Superman's mother, wanted to be an astronaut. But Krypton, for whatever reason, shifted its focus and funds from space exploration to harnessing and using the resources on a planet, which is kind of backwards. And Superman's father, Jor-El, also being equally as smart and gifted as his mother, he makes the observation that Krypton has always been a tough old ball of sun-beat dirt, but these days it's like something is wrong with the planet. How even the basic necessity of water and rain is hard to come by. And you might be saying, okay, why are these two great minds here just stuck doing manual labor on a farm? Well, because the Science League and ruling class of Krypton has a firm grip on the politics and actual sayings of what goes on Krypton. Because if you are even any bit of critical and give criticism to their workings and how they proceed with their actions, you are dumped and shipped to bottom tier dwellings. As example, his parents here are part of the Labor Guild, which of course is explained by the symbols on their chests, clothes, and other markings. The Science League rocking some sort of sun design on all of their materials, whereas the bottom tier, the Labor Guild, they are represented by the iconic and classic Superman shield and crest, which of course in the main prime DC universe was a House of L symbol, you know, the one on Superman's costume. And here it's usually seen as a mark of shame, representing the poor and working class of Krypton. But Superman's parents, his family, wore it with pride, because a part of this guild, they can create and effect real hands-on change on Krypton. As we see Jor-El lead an exploration into a dangerous mine shaft to check, as he is an engineer, and as this book goes on to say, the planet is rotting from the inside out. And like I said before, he is a farmer and an engineer, but he is a very intelligent one. Because when nobody else believes him that something is wrong with the planet itself, deep inside the mine shaft, suddenly everything starts to shake and rumble. Because it is almost like Krypton itself is dying slowly. As we see evidence of this when multiple giant spouts of green glowing liquid come gushing out of the ground, like an acid burning and disintegrating everything that it touches, from the machines and structures within the mine down to the people itself. And as you may think, this is Krypton's kryptonite. No, not radioactive pieces of Krypton when it explodes, but already part of the misused and abused Krypton now, which might serve to be its ultimate undoing. The greatest weakness of Superman may also become the greatest weakness of his people in Homeworld too. And you might even be asking yourself, okay, where is Superman in all of this? Where is Kal-El? Well, for us, his story doesn't even start here. It starts millions of light years away on a different side of the universe. On Earth. And no, not in Kansas or Smallville, because that would be too unoriginal. More of the same. No, in this Absolute universe, everything is different, as we pick up in Brazil. And on this Absolute Earth's Brazil, a couple crazy things are happening. Crazy, but not so unfamiliar. As we see, again, something happening in a mine. A group of workers, the poor and overworked residents in the slums of Brazil, are being wronged against and forced to mine diamonds. Forced by who? Well, the Lazarus Corporation, a group on Earth who seemingly own and rule over everything. But we also see that the story and chain of events are narrated by Kal-El himself, as he goes on to say how he is well aware of the evil things going on in the mine, just how it is across multiple places on Earth that he has traveled to and seen himself personally. And this is all happening because the Lazarus Corporation they have a monopoly on most industries and use it to abuse people to further their goals. In this case, forcing the miners and keeping their families hostage until they complete their task and find the special diamonds. And they enforce this by having the muscle of the Lazarus Corp, a group of beings called the Peacemakers, heavily armed and trained soldiers resembling, well, Peacemaker. They are kind of like the stormtroopers of the Lazarus Corporation. They're foot soldiers. But as we do see the workers of the mine try to go back and are forced to work in the hazardous and frankly deadly conditions of the mine, they are very surprised to see that someone has beat them. Some mysterious person found the ore and refined it into diamonds already, making their jobs not only that much easier but also potentially saving some lives. Because with the ore already refined into diamonds, all the miners have to do is simply take the loot and turn it in without slaving away in these harsh conditions. And as they do that, of course, different problems arise. Because the Peacemakers make note of how it is almost impossible how they are out already in such a short amount of time with the mined diamonds. But for us, we get a clue of who might have even done such a thing as we cut over to the night before, where we see the leader of the miners, Joao, the afro-haired individual, meet with a mysterious and frankly very interesting individual, Kal-El, Superman. And we see their first interaction with each other, because this absolute Superman here is portrayed as a sort of lone wanderer, questioning everything, seeking answers type character. And in a conversation with Joao, Superman goes on to say, "I have seen the wonders of your world. And I have seen a lot of places just like this, industries that run on suffering. How do you know what is truth and what is right?" With Joao simply saying, "You know when you have what is worth fighting for. That is truth." With Superman simply responding, "And what if you have nothing?" But before he can further question this line of thought, he then makes his departure, telling Joao thank you for giving him something to think and ponder about. Because right now Superman is kind of lost, looking for purpose and looking for truth in a completely different environment and world than what he grew up on, Krypton. But moving back onto present time, we see, well, the Peacemakers didn't take kindly to something being out of their control and a question they need answering, as they go to beat down the workers, questioning who gave them the diamonds and why are they breaking the peace. And as one of the Peacemaker guards goes to threaten Joao's life, literally putting a blade to his neck, suddenly he is saved as someone else says all the workers have been accounted for, all except one, as we see Kal-El in one of the homes in some sort of recharging station. But of course the Peacemakers know this and they are on their way to try and capture who this mysterious individual is. But before the Peacemakers are able to arrive, we see the thing that Superman is sleeping inside of is some sort of highly intelligent suit, an entity named Soul, which is kind of interesting that Superman needs this specialized suit or program, if you will, inferring two things. One, maybe his special power set isn't the same as it normally would. And two, it further goes to alienate himself and show you how he is a trespasser on Earth, needing a special kind of astronaut suit, if you will, to even be on Earth and do what he does. But eventually, a mini Peacemaker army does arrive, telling everybody to evacuate as they close in on Superman's location, as Kal-El goes on to further narrate saying, "Years of running all across the planet, always misery, always Lazarus, except this time I have left myself weak and sun-starved, dreaming of a time so long ago when I still knew who I was, Kal-El," as his suit wakes him up just in time as the Peacemakers invade. But like he said before, Superman is not at his A game. He isn't at his most powerful because he has been purposefully leaving himself sun-starved, in a weakened state, because that's when he feels most alive and can dream of times long ago, relive some memories, which isn't going to help him here as a giant battle breaks out. Superman absolutely decimating this Peacemaker forces, because as he continues to destroy everything, he goes on to say, "Maybe it is for the best that I haven't already left. Because after years of watching these people treat the poorest and lowest among them little more than cattle and animals, I've gotten tired of running." As we finally see in full this new absolute Superman suit. And in my opinion, even though I don't think it holds a candle to the iconic and original Superman suit, I still think it's pretty cool and pretty different. The first thing you can notice is that he doesn't have a cape, along with the all black and orange highlights. The orange highlight on his wrist and legs seem to be glowing with power, hinting that maybe this Superman has a different sort of abilities, but we will soon see that later on. And as he continues to fight through and battle these Peacemaker forces, his suit has some sort of onboard AI, similar to a Iron Man suit in Jarvis. And this artificial intelligence goes on to explain to Kal-El how, like the other Lazarus forces they have encountered, their weapons and armor incorporate technology not even native to this galaxy. And how Superman's quest to help these wronged people and do good, the suit kind of thinks that it's a worthless endeavor, because on this planet full of combustion engines, thermonuclear weapons, these people are never safe. And neither is Kal-El if he insists on exerting himself like this, fighting, especially with his solar energies quite depleted. But Superman goes on to make the argument that the workers are in danger and it is mainly his fault. All he ever did was try to help, but at least in this instant he made it kind of worse. But we do see him finally clear up the battlefield, using what seems seems to be his super speed or some sort of different ability, going fast and taking out all of the rest of the soldiers in a blink of an eye and helping the rest of the workers find safety, telling them if Lazarus won't pay, you should take the diamonds to someone who will. But for now, just get everyone out of here. And before he can further help, suddenly he is struck by some sort of electrical or lightning type attack. An attack that he actually feels and hurts him. And we see this is the doing of another special team part of the Lazarus Corporation. And this team is a highly effective specialized group compared to the normal foot soldiers that the Peacemakers are. And here, before they arrive on the battlefield, they go over some of the information that they know about this mysterious being. How that the higher ups want him defeated but alive. And how yes, he is the same man that was running around before, taking down some of their other locations and groups, with his physical abilities beyond all human scale, even down to noticing something is up with his suit. As a woman, who by the way, just keep a note on because she becomes really important and interesting towards the end, but she goes on to say, it's the suit. If you look closely, you can see it's shifting, changing shape, like a living armor protecting him. And sometimes I swear he is talking to it. Back down below on the actual battlefield, when Kal-El was struck with that attack, we see that set off something in his body. How suddenly he seems to be losing control, letting all of his pent up solar energy, his power, his essence, let out in one full swoop attack. Almost like a special move, coming out not only from his eyes, but his special gauntlets and other parts of his suit. Pure destructive energy. But like I said before, he can't control it. So yes, while that is a powerful attack, it is seemingly too much and is overwhelming him, as he goes on to tell his suit to shut him down. His suit not only complies, but goes on to say, Kal-El, it is my mission to protect you, to guard the last living person of the House of El. So I must urge you once again, do not engage. Do not risk your life for these people. Leave this place. Return to the shadows. You must never forget the lesson of Krypton. Some worlds simply cannot be saved. Not from themselves. As we see this weakened Superman, yes, he took out all of the forces, but he is too weak now, and frankly, it is just not worth it to continue fighting. As when more Lazarus reinforcements arrive, he does nothing but simply stand there and wait. And before he can do anything to get out of this bad situation, suddenly there is a clamp on his arm. Some sort of handcuff. As we see, this person who handcuffed him is none other than Agent Lane. Yes, Lois Lane, the same woman from before that I have mentioned, as she goes on to say that the suspect is in custody, pointing a weapon at Kal-El's face, saying, if you move, I fry your face, Superman. So yes, of course, it is Lois Lane in this absolute universe who was the first one to give Kal-El his iconic name and moniker, Superman. So yeah, right now it is really not looking good for the Man of Steel. And it might become even worse as moving thousands of miles over towards the Nevada desert, we see a mysterious person who is working with the Lazarus Corp looking over all of the footage of this new Superman. And it seems to be none other than a version of Brainiac. As he says, a scrumptious new toy. Wonder where you came from. And no, that is not all, as we move over again to the middle of Kansas, where we see the Kent's farm, old, destroyed, and decomposing, but most importantly, we see a sign that says the property of Lazarus. Meaning, yes, it seems like Lazarus has hands all across the world in this absolute universe, from Superman's iconic villains Brainiac, from even down to his landing place and his human family, the Kents. As this very powerful and resourceful corporation is seemingly controlled by a version of Brainiac himself. He is currently now handcuffed to one very special individual. This absolute version of Lois Lane, who is working for the enemy. No, she isn't some sort of reporter or writer, but she is a military soldier. One who is crossing paths with Superman on different sides. They are enemies. And so you might be thinking, okay, well, this is Superman. Surely just any old Earth army shouldn't be a huge threat to him, but they are. You see, this Superman is different. He isn't as powerful as we are used to seeing him. You know, maybe that could be summed up to him not having enough time on Earth to fully absorb sunlight. Or maybe in this absolute universe, his whole Kryptonian physiology just is a little different. Or maybe it's something with the high-tech nanotech suit he is wearing. Either way, we know that this army here does pose a pretty big threat to Superman, and their weapons do hurt him. Now, they aren't like bullets to a normal human where they're deadly, but if he takes enough damage, it might be able to incapacitate Superman. And as Superman stares down this giant army, we see the entire battle start to break out. And something very interesting about this version of Superman, his suit is sentient, meaning it can help and fight for him. As we see it unravel and form a shield around him, yes, it's his cape. So in his base suit so far, at least, he doesn't use his cape like normal Superman would. But here, when he goes into battle mode, he uses it as some sort of high-tech shield, shielding not only him, but Lois Lane from the direct fire of the Lazarus Corporation. And as Superman is trying to figure out what his next move should be, as he can't really just escape with this strange mysterious woman hooked onto his wrist, he instead now just decides to get away from all of this battle. So instead he makes a tactical retreat, telling his suit to shield her as he leaps up hundreds of feet into the air getting away. And it's interesting that he leaps and doesn't fly, because for now it seems like this Superman has more of his golden age abilities, you know, faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, more of that sort of thing, instead of flying at light speed or whatever Superman is currently doing. All while, of course, Lois Lane is screaming for her life, being dragged off into this crazy mess. And it gets even crazier as their tanks start to shoot him down from mid-air, hitting him dead on and crashing him into a nearest village. But even through it all, Superman being the good-hearted individual that he is, he makes sure there's no casualties if he can prevent it, saving Lois Lane throughout it all. And even though Superman so far has been her savior, she doesn't see it like this, and she is a trained soldier, as soon as she gets the chance, she attacks and hurts him, while trying to call into the rest of her squad to get him locked up. But as we will see throughout this entire story, Lois doesn't stay like this. She doesn't stay as some cold-blooded soldier just following orders, not even thinking about who she is hurting and what she's doing. We see the seeds planted as she slowly starts to change, with of course her first being checked here by Superman, as they get into a little bit of an argument, with Lois Lane thinking his escape and running is endangering not only himself but other people, from Lazarus, who just wants to help him, quote unquote. But Superman sees this a different way, because he not only calls Lois arrogant in how she is angry at anyone who she doesn't think is as smart as her, which is usually everyone who opens their mouth in their vicinity, and how she is everything that's wrong with this planet, with her planet, her people, humanity. And of course with Lois immediately being thrown off by him saying her planet, with no one knowing Superman is really an alien from millions of light years away across the galaxy, we see their conversation is interrupted as they are still in the middle of an active warfare and fighting for their very lives and survival, as more explosions and flying tanks in the sky rain down fire. And Superman, of course, jumping into action, he starts to defend this people of this little town, this little village, picking up a car and throwing it at the helicopter, telling everybody to get to safety. And this next part and next few interactions are really interesting because we see it from Lois's perspective, as we see her and Superman still tied together, make it through this little town trying to save and protect who they can. She eventually starts to see the horrors that the Lazarus Corporation, the corporation she works for, and thought they were the good guys doing the good work. She starts to see them for what they really are, villains, evil people, with no regard for the innocent people and just trampling and doing what they want. Because as the comic goes on to say, while Lois is writing a report, we see her say that she first thought it had to be the suit, that surely this Superman is what he's being called. It's just a normal man with some high level technology. And sure, the suit is pretty powerful and does display some level of sentience. After her direct observation, she can profoundly say that it isn't just a suit. This Superman is plenty super on his own. With of course this full extent of his powers being uncharted, she makes note that even Superman himself doesn't fully understand the limits of his own abilities. And that all of this, you know, his heroic work in wandering, saving what he can, is all still relatively new to him as well. And how in some ways Superman is still very much still a boy, one who hasn't fully yet deciphered who he is and who he wants to be. And with this we see an awesome spreadsheet panel, which in my opinion represents what Superman stands for. As you see, he was able to save everyone, even at the cost of himself, stripped down and laid bare, giving everything he had to make sure these other people were safe and unharmed. With Lois even going on to further say, in other ways, he is every bit a man with certain ethos that seem unshakable, and how he seems like a man who just cannot help but be earnest, who could never lie even if he wanted to. And they know from other sightings that Superman has traveled the globe, he speaks multiple languages, but yet still, she thinks he still has the air of a lost child, a son without a home. As we see Superman using his extended power set, such as his freeze breath and his laser eyes, finishing up defeating the rest of the forces there, and finally collecting his cape back. Because interestingly enough, the nanotech, or whatever his suit is made out of, even has healing properties, able to heal the damaged civilians that he saved. And after everything was all said and done, we see Superman even go on to thank Lois. And of course, with her not really being sure why he is thanking her, because really he did all the work in saving, Clark goes on to further explain, there are more stars in the night sky than you can possibly imagine, and so many of those stars are orbited by nothing but chunks of rock. Do you people have any idea how precious a place like this is, how precious Earth is? Because of course, Earth being somewhat of a Goldilocks situation, perfect for the way humanity is living on it and how they came up, and especially unlike Clark on his own doomed planet, who of course, knowing the story of Krypton, eventually blew up, making Clark one of the sole survivors. And because of this, he starts to open up to Lois, starting to talk about how he is a child of one of those sons of nothing. But before he can fully unravel, fully lay out more information and open up, suddenly the handcuffs unclick. The sentient suit finally disabled them, freeing Superman and Lois from being connected together. And of course, with Superman being free now, he immediately rockets off, getting as far away from the situation and people as he can. But the impact Superman has left not only on Lois herself, but the people in this village is already set in stone, forever changing and altering their trajectory. And later on, we see Lois talking to Brainiac, the brains behind the entire Lazarus Corporation. And funny enough, every time Lois tries to explain the situation, how good of a man Clark was being and actually being a hero and not the destructive, wayward person that Lazarus thinks he is, Brainiac keeps twisting her words, making him seem way more dangerous and unhinged than he really is. Because as it goes on to ask Lois, how grave of a danger would you rank Superman on a scale of 1 to 10? And of course, with Lois seeing firsthand how Superman was saving people, she says, well, I wouldn't rank him as a danger at all. He's incredibly powerful, yes, and still kind of raw in some of those ways, but I don't think he's looking for a fight. He doesn't strike me as someone who... Instead, Brainiac associates Superman with a level 8 ranking of danger. And with Brainiac continuing on asking, do you feel like the threat that Superman poses warrants neutralization, or can Superman be controlled? Well, no, he can't be controlled. Brainiac takes this as he needs to be terminated, which of course frustrates Lois to no end. Her words are being twisted and making Superman seem like a straight up monster, a villain, more than the hero he really is. And this frustrates her so much that she decides she needs to do the report herself. And apparently in this universe, in this situation, this Lois straight up hates doing reports. Writing, which is ironic how in the main DC continuity she is a reporter herself who specializes in journalism and writing. Instead here she feels so strongly that she needs to write her version of events down in a concise way that can't be twisted into something else. She gets to typing up her adventures with Superman, if you will. But moving over back in time in light years away, we pick up on Krypton in the past, which so far this series is kind of ping-ponging between Krypton in the past and Earth in the future with Superman, slowly bridging the gap between what happened on Krypton that led to its obvious destruction and how Superman arrived on Earth doing what he is now. But here we see an interesting revelation, how his suit, that very special, advanced, sentient powered suit, the stuff that it was made out of, was conjured up, created, and given to him by none other than his parents. How originally its purpose was supposed to be an exploratory spacesuit and rocket ship all in one. Super high-tech technology. But of course, with this technology this revolutionary, you would say, okay, well, how come Krypton didn't do more to survive? Well, here in this universe, of course, Superman's parents, instead of being in a higher echelon of the Scientist League of Krypton, they were just lowly farmers. And assumingly, they weren't able to convince the rest of Krypton to use this technology, that the planet itself is in danger. So instead, they gave it to their one beloved son, who of course in the present day, we see him with this technology as we cut back to Earth, as Superman is wandering once more, heading towards Venezuela, wandering the Earth once more to see who he can help and what his purpose truly is. But little does he know, him, Lois, the entire Lazarus Corporation are all going to be interconnected more than he can ever think. As when we cut back to the village and town they were at before, where Superman saved all of those people, we see that the Peacemakers, the enforcers of the Lazarus Corporation, finally arrive and trying to clean up from the giant battle and mess. And here we see things take a, well, pretty dark and disturbing turn, because we see one of the Peacemakers, one who they call Smith, which interestingly enough, the main Peacemaker in the normal DC universe, last name is Smith. So maybe this could be a nod that that's him. But we see Smith here having some doubts about this entire thing, and how Superman, all he did was look at him, and boom, his entire squad was downed. And of course, with the rest of the Peacemakers' egos being crushed and flattened from easily being defeated, they go to take their rage out on innocent people. As they go on to say, I bet you every single one of these people know where Superman is hiding. They don't get it. They don't appreciate everything we've done to pull them out of the mud. So we have to teach them. Teach them that peace has a price. As they literally go to mow down and murder civilians. Innocent people who are just trying to live their lives. And you can bet once Superman or even Lois gets word of these injustices going on within the Lazarus Corporation, they may even have to team up once more to take down this entire worldly operation from the inside out. And so with that, we actually pick up years ago on Krypton, back when it was mostly still a healthy planet. And now this is where things get interesting, because usually in the main DC universe, to my knowledge at least, we don't really get too much of Clark's on Krypton life, simply because, well, he got shot into space towards Earth when he was nothing more than a baby. But here things are different. Here in the absolute universe, he is older, he's a child, he actually grew up with his Kryptonian parents in the flesh. And later, as we maybe might find out, maybe his parents don't seem to share fate that they usually would. But here on Krypton, we see Superman, or Kal-El, was a little bit of a troublemaker. No, he wasn't a wild or rebellious kid, but instead he went against the grain of Krypton and its current tradition in society. School was always a challenge for him. So on Krypton, you basically only have a couple of avenues growing up. Everybody is shifted through into these very specific societal roles. You have the Law Guild, where basically people go to become cops, dealing with anything with Kryptonian law. Then you have the Science Guild, where basically the smartest top of top people go to use their intelligence to build and rule over Krypton. And then you have people all the way at the bottom, the Labor Guild, the people who actually are hands-on on the ground, slaving away mining, construction, farming, to actually produce tangible things for the other people on Krypton. And for Kal-El, not only was he happy to be inside of the labor guild, but that was the field his parents were in. Because as we will find out, not only was Superman different from a whole lot of other Kryptonians, but so were his parents, which he probably got it from. Because dare I say, from what we can infer from the story so far, Jor-El and Lara, his father and mother respectively, are some of the most hardworking and kind-hearted Kryptonians versus the normal societal cruel and selfish. But while Kal is out with his parents hiking in the Kryptonian forest, we see them go to a special place, a structure looking like a giant red version of the Fortress of Solitude, which is a place that Superman, or Kal-El, has came to consider a second home, which of course is just foreshadowing his eventual, or presumably in this absolute universe, things are obviously different, but his potential residence on the Fortress of Solitude on Earth. And while all three of them are here, plus Krypto, which is cool to see him introduced, and I wonder if he made it back to Earth, but still, while they're all here, we see this is the time where his parents essentially go to confront Kal-El about his grades and him flunking out in school, with them specifically bringing up the point how Kal-El has been refusing to use the Science League's Luminarium, which is essentially a giant database spanning thousands of years of Kryptonian knowledge, and it writes the report for them, essentially a super advanced AI, and instead, Kal-El has been deciding to write it himself, something that not only goes against 3,000 years of Kryptonian tradition, but is uniquely frowned upon. But as Kal-El says, he just can't help it. His words make him happy, which I just love how this sets up his love for journalism, which he eventually does at the Daily Planet in the normal universe. But here it takes it a step further because it's actually very wrong to do on Krypton, and how that's not the norm. Clark is an outcast. He is different from all of his other fellow Kryptonians. And here it seems like his parents are almost disapproving of Clark's methods, with his father going on to say, well, it's not only affecting your grades, but getting you into trouble. And your mother and I, we've talked about this a lot, so keep it up. Because yes, in a twist that even confuses Kal-El himself, his parents don't actually care. If anything, they encourage it. They encourage Clark to be different, to be special in his own unique way, even if that goes against what is considered normal in this Kryptonian society. Because his mother then goes on to say, she doesn't care about what his grades say or his school, she already knows that he is the sharpest, most caring kid in the whole world, and they trust him to find his own path. Which, seeing Kal-El here, surrounded by nothing but love and positivity, we know something must go horribly wrong in the foreseeable future for him to be how he is on Earth, a distant traveler on an entirely different world, lost and purposeless, drifting through life. And right here is the pivotal moment where we actually start to see that downfall. His parents are the first one to see it, the first one to notice something isn't right, and how whatever they were doing, bonding, exploring, family time, has to now wait for something extreme. Because his parents, who are both farmers and engineers and are both highly intelligent, we find out that something is wrong with the planet itself and how they have been experimenting, building something, trying to figure out a solution to a very extravagant problem. Because the comic goes on to say, Jor-El, his father, has spent a lot of time taking samples from deep within the mountain, and at night, Kal-El can even swore he heard his parents crying, sobbing. And ever since the accident at the mine, his father has seemed distant and distracted. Day in and day out, both his mother and father have been building something, tinkering, coming up with a solution that, frankly, is not a guarantee, nor will the other people in ruling class of Krypton possibly agree to, with Jor-El, Kal-El's father, going on to say the proof that he has gathered is irrefutable, and what's going to happen could be months from now, or it could be literal days. And even though whatever they're talking about seems to be shrouded in some mystery, we see Kal-El himself go on to explore and try to solve this mystery himself. Because as we find out to absolutely no one's surprise, something is wrong with Krypton itself, the entire planet. It's dying, crying out for help. Farmland, crops, animals, everything living was slowly withering away, and no one could explain why, as a poisonous green ooze seeps up from the ground, killing anything it touches, which in my opinion is going to be the basis for this universe's Kryptonite, or at least I assume so, and it would only make sense, you know? But it seems here it is in some type of gas, which is different from the crystallized form we normally see it in. Of course, the elites of Krypton in the higher up echelon go on to report that this is nothing out of the usual and everything is okay. It is just natural gas leaks that will come and go and everybody will be fine. Of course, we know this is nothing but lies, and potentially they are hiding something huge. And so a week later, after Kal-El has made his personal discovery of what's truly going on, he and his class took a field trip to the city of Kandor. And along the way, he just started to put everything all into writing. Everything that he has seen, that he has gathered, that he knows about the truth of what's really going on. But again, personal writing, especially something that the higher ups are trying to hide, this is a big no-no. But before he can stop himself, he already submitted his story to the school's news board. But of course, by the time they actually got to their destination at Kandor, the story was removed and deleted. All the personal notes remotely from his tablet removed and gone forever. And directly because of this, there was a discipline appointment set for his parents to see the school administrator. But because of the events that we see shortly, they will never make it to that meeting. Instead, their lives will change forever for the worse. Because as we see Kal here on his field trip, to one of the giant towers and corporations working for the Science Guild, we see Clark here just at the right place, right time for him to witness something that would change his life forever. He sees his actual father, Jor-El, being dragged out by the guards because he has taken all of his discovery, all of his research. Knowing that the planet itself is doomed and dying, he is trying to take it to the Science Guild to let everybody know, to warn everyone that their lives are in danger. And what do they do with this potentially saving information? They instead beat him and call what he is doing scientific heresy. Because of course, the Science Guild of Krypton can never be wrong. They are in full control. And anyone that says otherwise, especially if you're in the Laborer Guild, the lowest tier of society here, you just go straight in a cell. With Kal-El being forced to watch his father be tased and beat in front of him. And you know, previous to this before, Kal-El has been a pretty reserved kid. He has never been exposed to any real violence, nor has he had any reason to. But here something snaps, something changes within him. Previous to this moment, he doesn't think he has ever raised his voice before, yelling out for them to get away from his father. He clenched his fist so tight it throbbed with anger. He was enraged, wildly confused, and yet somehow he was utterly helpless. There was nothing he could do as he watched the officers lead his father away. And instead, he does the one thing he can do, rushing back home to get help from his very intelligent and frankly very capable mother. And you know, I'm not frankly sure if it's ever fully explained or fully explored in the main DC universe what Superman's mother is like, his Kryptonian mother. You know, more of the focus is usually on Jor-El, his very intelligent father. But here in this universe, we actually get to see what his mother is like. And frankly, I don't blame Jor-El, because as soon as Kal-El goes to tell his mother what happened, we see immediately, all hands on deck, her rushing to go to help. Because what man wouldn't want a wife who, if you're in trouble, no questions asked, boom, she's just ready, suiting up, gearing up to help you out and has your back. Because not only is she very capable, but this is a scenario that they have been preparing for, which we see her in a pretty awesome looking suit, the same one that currently Superman is wearing back on Earth in the future, and with her with a ginormous looking gun, which we later finds out shoots literal lava at his enemies. Which if that isn't just an insane weapon that fits this whole absolute universe, I don't know what is. But as she geared up, we see her tell Kal-El that yes, she does actually want him to come with her to save his father. But if anything does go wrong, he is to get on his bike and run, come back here as fast as you can, back to safety. And so with that, moving over to the Law Guild, you know, the section of Kryptonian society where the officers and enforcers reside. And here we see all hell break loose as she comes blasting in, defeating everyone she can, looking for Jor-El. Not only that, but we see Krypto get a little bit in the action as well, zooming in, taking out guards of his own, because as we find out that the technology that's in his cape is the same one that Superman has now, is frankly very powerful. But because they are intruders, we see the active defense system come to life, targeting Lara, Superman's mother, getting ready to destroy her. But her invention, the almost nanotech suit, is very capable and powerful, as it shields around her, protecting her, then going on to destroy each and every drone, as you see a pretty menacing pose of her with the mask on and the suit finally revealed. And you know, it seems like this technology that they have made is pretty unstoppable, as she is able to get to Jor-El and eventually free him. And so while all of this is going on, we see what Kal-El is doing throughout all of this chaos, with him eventually making his way towards the tech and the computing part of this base, as he even makes mention in his head that yes, while they are here and got through, this was too easy. This place should have been swarming with other officers, shock troopers and judge generals, but it just wasn't. There was only base enforcers here. And just why was that? Where is everybody? And the answer even shocks Kal-El himself, as we find out the ruling class of Krypton, the elites, have been building starships right under the noses of everybody. Because of course, yes, they have known entirely too well of what is going on within the planet. So instead of trying to quell this problem and help everybody else, the selfish elites were planning to just ditch everyone to die and saving their own life, to find refuge on a different planet and save only them. But after rescuing and escaping with Jor-El this time, we see his parents finally start to reveal the secret they have been keeping from Kal-El, that Krypton is dying. Fortunately though, Kal-El has already figured it out from his own journaling and researching, and has came to his own conclusion about what he thinks is going to go on from here. As he goes on to say and tell to his parents, you want to shoot me into space, to save me, but just me, all alone, and wearing the spacesuit that mom has made when she was a kid. You know, obviously referencing the usual origin of Superman, you know, his whole planet on the brink of extinction, yet the last son of Krypton makes it out and survives. Except, you know, Supergirl, Krypto, and a handful of other Kryptonians, but you know the general premise, he's the last survivor. Instead here, that gets flipped on his head, because his parents goes on to say, no, well, you're mostly right, but no, we would never go without you. As it turns out, they have been building something in secret themselves, an entire ship of their own, because yes, they are going to go together, which yeah, like I said, has crazy ramifications for Superman on Earth, because if he's there, possibly his parents are there too. But not only that, Remember in the beginning how I said his parents are probably some of the most intelligent and best of Krypton of what they have to offer? Well, we see why they built a ship this big. Because not only them, but their cousins, their neighbors, as many Kryptonians as the ship can hold, they are bringing them off Earth to save everyone they can. And their only problem with this is they wish they could have built a ship big enough for the entire planet. Because yes, as a science league, the other intelligent people of Krypton, they were selfish. They got off the planet leaving everyone to die, whereas the good-hearted and willed Jor-El and Lara are selfless and built a ship to save everyone they can. Which raises a whole new batch of questions, because we know Superman, Kal-El, was able to make it to Earth safe and sound. So what happened to his parents and or the bunch of other Kryptonians that were supposedly coming with him? Maybe there's a secret underground hideout of superpowered Earth Kryptonians with powers of that of Kryptonians under a yellow sun. Or another path, something equally as possible, something still happened in Superman, unfortunately is still the last survivor of his home planet. But no, there's more, as now we cut back over to the other side of the universe and forward in time to present day as we pick up in central Kansas, specifically in Smallville at a senior living home, where we see Martha Kent herself, the Earth Mother of Superman, and unfortunately she has seen better days. It looks like she is at death's door as she calls out for her lost son to fly back to her, back where he belonged, which is just a funny dichotomy where we see Batman over an absolute Batman with his mother still alive versus Superman, his mother, his Earth Mother, dying, both named Martha except both flipped from what they usually are. And with that comes their little power struggle, with them trying to subjugate different countries and abusing, distorting, and taking over many different communities, specifically being their little armed force here, the Peacemakers, who a lot of them have no regard for human life. And actually, funnily enough, one of the top generals in this Lazarus corporation is Lois Lane herself, who in this universe now isn't a reporter or anything of the sort. She is a soldier, a general. But after a brief encounter with Superman, things started to shift, and now everyone wants to know where he is because he is creating change wherever he goes. But not just everywhere he goes, but changing people he meets, as even Lois herself will soon start to change, as she goes on to question a little bit of the inhabitants of different places around the world that Superman has been and tried to help fight against Lazarus, the corporation she is working for. So it's kind of a conflict of interest, because on one hand, Lois Lane here, in this universe tainted by Darkseid's essence, this absolute universe, she still isn't evil. She has a heart. She has more universal ideals, meaning someone like her, she isn't going to take joy in the mistreatment of people, with her going on to interview people who have had direct experiences with this now elusive and mysterious Superman, from India to Mexico to the United States, Vietnam, Egypt, Brazil. Superman has been global, trying to fight this mass corporation. But of course, as she is questioning these people, no one really wants to give up what they know about Superman or their experience with him, because in a world full of mistreatment from this giant corporation, Superman is like a shining light at the end of the tunnel. And so while with these people here finally seeing something good in the world, just give up the information and possibly get Superman captured or even killed, with her going on to talk to these people saying, look, I get it. You feel like you need to protect him from me, but I am the one who wants to protect him. He is alone out there, and I believe he is very far from home. Yes, he can do amazing things, we know that, we've seen it, but can he really control those powers of his? Sooner or later he's going to get himself hurt, or someone else. He is afraid and he needs help. No, he wants help, and I can help him. You don't trust the Lazarus Corporation, I get that. Yes, they promise you prosperity, but you live in an informal settlement with about 400,000 other workers. Of course, not ideal situation, but she here isn't asking them to trust Lazarus. She's just asking them to trust her. And she is fully aware that she is going to have to earn that trust from the grave mistakes that Lazarus has done to these people before. With her continuing saying, forget all the other questions I was asking, and for a second, just tell me one thing. Who gave you these wounds? Specifically in this case with a woman from Egypt who is missing or has a damaged left eye. And with this, we immediately jump over to see the actual culprit, who has been personally, or at least one of them, hurting these people beyond what they're supposed to do, even though in the Lazarus Corporation, it's not really looked down upon. Because really, if you're in the Lazarus Corporation, your morals are already less than ideal. Except Lois Lane here, she isn't like everybody else. She is the exception, or at least one of them. So with her specifically looking out to find the guy who did this, hurting these innocent people, we see she isn't all too kind, literally fighting and beating him. With her saying, I hear you like to cut people for fun, so tell me which one of your hands is your knifing hand. And as he does show what hand it is, she reaches over, pulling and breaking his hand. Very brutally and painful stuff, which of course afterwards she places him under arrest, which pretty deserved, from all the people he has hurt in his line of duty, abusing his power. This is probably just 1% of everything he has done to other people. But moving back over to the civilians and hurt people she was interviewing before to find a little bit more information about where this Superman is, we then see the script flipped on her this time, with one of the people from Brazil before saying, I know why you were chasing him, even if you don't know yourself. It changes you, just being in his presence. And I know you feel this, I can tell. You were struck by lightning, Agent Lane, and now you cannot help but chase the storm. which is very cool that they refer to him as the Storm, because later, as we see him with his powers and suits and abilities, he's almost like a complete force of nature. But even then, we see some of the other people and their experiences with Superman and them even trying to find him afterwards. But as I said before, he is mysterious and elusive, just like a whisper in the night. And as one guy goes to very interestingly explain Superman, he says that Superman is a whisper who walks among screams. He sees all: children in cages, families clinging to rafts, grown men weeping on factory floors. And as you said before, yes, he is afraid, but not afraid of you, not afraid of Lazarus. But Superman fears the day that Lazarus will drive him to such anger that he cannot help but save the world. And in some of these people's mind, saving the world from Lazarus doesn't just mean them going away and doing it somewhere else. For them, it means literally killing them all. Some of these people even pray for such things, which yes, kind of makes sense in their experience. A global force so corrupt, so absolute and abusive that it infects and abuses every part of their life. But it's going to be really interesting to see how when Superman actually does show up and takes on this corporation as a large instead of just small bits and pieces around the world, how in the end, once he does win, assumingly at least, because this is an absolute universe, nothing is set in stone, and this Superman isn't even like our normal Clark, but eventually him taking down Lazarus and not just killing everyone from top to bottom and getting rid of them that way, but actually defeating them and making systematic change. It's just going to show these people that yes, Lazarus is wrong, and obviously wishing death on everyone isn't correct or right, but yet Superman still has a better path. But Lois Lane being a lot of things, one of them being very stubborn. Because afterwards, after all of her interviews and talking to these people, she doesn't let up on her little manhunt for the Superman here. If anything, she pushes twice as hard. Her going on to say, Superman, if you can hear me, your friends were wrong. I am not just chasing the storm, I am the storm, and you cannot hide from me forever. But while she's still on this giant manhunt for Superman, we then get a little bit of an interaction between her and her father, which is interesting because usually in the main continuity, her father is usually dead. But here he is alive but retired and older. And Lois Lane has never had the best relationship with her father no matter in what continuity. And here is really no different. While yes, they aren't on a no talking basis because obviously they're talking here, but they're very professional and not really a very personal relationship, as one would with a parent and child. With her just relaying to her father, who is a retired general himself, with everything she's doing in tracking down this Superman. Her even saying, I've chased him across 6 continents, stood directly in every shack and place he slept in. I've talked to anybody who so much as stood near the guy. He's destroyed about $1 trillion worth of tanks. But his body count, his kill count, is a big fat 0. You see, he's not a killer, nor a soldier. He's just some sort of mumbly little hippie boy. And the response of the father here is essentially, yeah, that's maybe what you could gather, but that's the same thing they were saying about the cult leader Charles Manson once upon a time, with him still wanting her to take different squads of peacemakers with her, just in case if anything happens. But Lois Lane is against this because she can't go in the field with a death squad of peacemakers because she needs these people to actually trust her. But the father, being an older military general, especially a general in his Lazarus Corporation, his views on civilian trust and community interface is very different than what ideally it should be, with him going to recount a previous story of someone working under him. An engagement officer who, much like Lois Lane, saw the importance of community and didn't want some sort of armed escort when he went into different villages. And while he was on his day-to-day excursions, the last this retired general saw of him was a video from the Omega Men, a group of people, terrorists in his eyes, wearing masks, jabbering something about freedom, but he couldn't really make out what they were saying over the sound of a bandsaw cutting his officer to pieces. But like I said before, especially in this Lazarus Corporation, Lois Lane is the exception, even going against the word and advice of her own father, going to continue to search out and look for Superman without any of these abusive peacemakers by her side, which eventually will lead her into hot water. But we don't just get to see how corrupt this Lazarus Corporation is from the innocence and civilian point of view, and even slowly Lois Lane seeing herself, but we even see it from deep within Lazarus itself, where we see one of the peacemakers essentially have a therapy session and mission review from one of his recent catastrophes, with him going on to say, I just couldn't help myself. The way he tossed us around, it's like we were nothing. He melted our armors with his eyes. And those people, the civilians, they were just smiling about it, having a great big laugh. And this peacemaker here, he just couldn't take it, so he did something about it. He tried to kill them, kill the innocent civilians purposely. But the computer here just tries to rationalize this decision, going on to say, yes, you were in shock. Yes, you were in shock from the trauma that you had endured at the hands of the Superman, and your weapon accidentally discharged in the vicinity of the unarmed civilians. Luckily, no one was hurt. No doubt it was your peacemaker training that prevented any injuries. But this man here is very adamant that no, this is absolutely not the case, and he just missed. He was nervous, his hands were shaking, but he was definitely trying and aiming to shoot them purposely. Him being a peacemaker, they are trained to maintain peace at all costs, even if that cost is killing innocent civilians who don't align with their own plan. And this man man being self-aware, even though mentally you can tell that he really isn't alright and needs actual help. He even says himself, sometimes I worry that I can do really awful things in the name of peace. But the system here, who I think for the first time actually calls itself Brainiac, it says Brainiac understands. What you were saying is your gun simply misfired. As Brainiac, this system, this artificial intelligence, AI, whatever, goes on to try and gaslight the man, because this is what Brainiac wants. He doesn't want them in their right mind, making moral decisions on the battlefield. He just wants soldiers who can follow orders, and sometimes, Brainiac not being an organic being, he doesn't really see the value in human life like someone, even this Peacemaker here, does, with him even begging Brainiac, this system, to listen. But Brainiac instead just goes to re-enlist this unwell man, saying, you will be issued a new rifle and you will return to duty immediately. And now this concludes your little therapy session, Peacemaker Smith. Lazarus thanks you for your service. Just showing you that Lazarus is basically corrupt from the top down. And really up to this point, the only people trying to suppress or oppress Lazarus as a whole is of course Superman and something called the Omega Men, which moving over, we start to see a little bit more about what this group even is, with Lois Lane finding one of their members alone in this village here. And so they go to have a little bit of a conversation, with at first Lois asking this person, who is he? But as we will find out, this mysterious man here and the Omega Men in general, they know a lot more than what they're leading on, or Lois even knows about herself. Because as this man goes on to say, I'm not here to kill you. I know what you have been told about this Agent Lane, but Lazarus is built on lies. I mean, you're a smart woman and all. Haven't you ever wondered if you're really on the right side? He says, activating his armor and blinding her. But really funnily enough, it turns out Lois Lane has been trained to fight while blind, as she punches him square in his gut even while blinded and can't fully see. And now here with them starting to have a little bit of a scuffle, they have a conversation while they fight, with this mysterious Omega Men here going on to say, I know you have been with Lazarus for 3 years, ever since your father's accident. Yes, I've done my research and you're one of the sharpest agents, but I bet I know more about your employees than you do. Do you even know who the Lazarus director is? But yeah, Lois here isn't just going to take some information from perceived terrorist in a very violent organization. Eventually though, they come to a standstill. Both have their guns trained and aimed at each other. But again, this man here, this agent of the Omega Men, wasn't here to hurt or really kill Lois. He really just wanted a conversation. Unfortunately though, his time in trying to just talk with her runs out, as he goes on to say, I really hoped you would have been ready for the truth, but I'm afraid my time is up. So I have just one more thing left to say to you. Run, before explosions and gunshots ring out from above. Because yes, backup has arrived. It isn't just him part of this Omega Men group, of course not. Taking on Lazarus can't be a one-man army. As you see another agent named Omega Prime arrive, this time fully intent on taking out Lois Lane permanently. And now with gunshots ringing out, the Brainiac system in her suits sends an automatic message to some of the Peacemakers nearby, alerting them to her location and going to start a giant battle. But as Lois Lane and this Omega Prime finally meet face to face, we find out that they aren't really strangers, as whoever this mysterious woman goes on to say, I'm an old friend of the family. But it seems even in their little battle here, eventually red dust starts to gather all around, arriving in giant clumps, giant clouds, as like I have explained before, almost like a force of nature does something arrive. Something producing high level winds sending everybody back. As one figure descends down, it's finally him. They have found the Superman. As Superman, Clark arrives for the first time throughout this entire story. And you know, the Omega Man and Superman ideally would go hand in hand, both fight against the very oppressive rule of Lazarus, albeit in very different means, because the Omega Man group are very happy with just killing any one of the Lazarus or Peacemakers that they find, whereas Superman seems to stick to his iconic no-kill approach. But as soon as he lands, we see Omega Prime go up to talk to him, because up to this point, no one can really get their hands or have a conversation with Superman. He has just been so elusive. As Omega Prime goes up to say, Superman, the Omega Men stand ready to help you with your fight against Lazarus. Please just come with us, and together we can. But unfortunately, she isn't able to finish her sentence, as Superman just whooshes her away, smacking her to the side. Because he isn't here for her or the Omega Men, no. They are none of his interest. He is here specifically for Lois Lane, turning to her and demanding her to stop looking for him, because even though she just wants to have a conversation with him, he has nothing to say to her. And to make matters worse, finally all the other Peacemakers arrive and they start to have a little bit of a standoff. Well, I say standoff in quotations because this is Superman after all. These low-level agents really didn't stand much of a chance anyway. But as one Peacemaker in particular takes aim at Superman, he frustratively questions and asks Superman, does he remember him? And Superman, having his mind trained on the bigger picture, simply says no as he uses his frost breath to freeze everyone here, instantly ending the battle just like that with zero minimal effort. And before Lois Lane can even say a word, anything now that she has Superman in the flesh right here in front of her, he rockets off just like that. Again, just like a very elusive and mysterious whisper, here one moment and gone the next. And even here, while they were frozen here in this little block of ice, we see some of the civilians from the village that they were fighting in all come up to laugh at the absolute and pitiful defeat of Lazarus and the Peacemakers here. And just remember this little interaction here with the civilians. Moving over, we pick up with the Omega Men, seeing where they went after they escaped, with Omega Prime being mad at this other agent that he essentially cost them two things: their meeting with Superman and Lois Lane. Her scolding him that yes, he had the chance to take the shot against Lane, but he failed. Also revealing that yeah, this is this universe's version of Jimmy Olsen, who again, much just like Lois Lane, isn't the reporter or anything. No, he's an agent working against this Lazarus corporation, in contrast to Lois Lane being a general in Lazarus. But the reason why he didn't take the shot or go against her is because he feels like she can be saved. He believes that Agent Lane can be convinced that she has a good heart. She just needs more time to accept that, and then just maybe she can realize that she is on the wrong side. And speaking of the wrong side in question, we move back over with the Peacemakers from before, who were frozen in that little ice block from their little pitiful battle with Superman. And we go to find out something very tragic has happened, as that Peacemaker before, the one from earlier talking with Brainiac, who we could tell was very mentally unwell and unstable. We see him losing control, blacking out in just pure rage, after doing something almost unthinkable. Him going on to ask, wait, what happened? Last thing I remember is Superman, he spit on us and froze us, and then everyone was just pointing and laughing at us. What did I do? And as we find out, all of those innocent civilians before, the people at the village who were there witnessing the spectacle, he shot and gunned them all down, killing every last one. And even one of the other Peacemakers know that they are in big trouble now, as he goes on to say, you just brought down a storm on all of our heads. And especially with the next issue being called The Rage of Superman, it is not going to be pretty for Lazarus or any of the Peacemakers here. And speaking of death, murder, and loss, we move back in time to Krypton. You know, the iconic planet where almost everyone dies in the end due to the planet's government and elites and their selfishness. Because now with the deterioration and radiation polluting the planet now being public knowledge, everything is in chaos and ruin. His parents being formally sentenced to death by the elites and police force of Krypton for sharing and participating in said knowledge that they were trying to keep hidden. But at this moment, there is no safe place left on Krypton, not just for Kal-El and his family, but for anyone. As a comic goes on to say, the world finally knew the truth, that Krypton was breathing its last breath. In the Science League, the elite of Krypton had known this for months, but they tried to hide the truth while secretly enacting their own plans for escape. But in the wake of this new revelation, the planet began to explode in more ways than one. Full-on riots and chaos swept across the Redlands, along with rumors of massacres in the city. Towers and buildings burning in the distance, all while the planet itself, Krypton, was coming apart beneath them. And while everything does seem hopeless for the people of Krypton and their planet here, of course knowing how it all ends, it seems like Superman, Kal-El's parents, at least have a plan or are trying to make it work, as they have created a giant ship, not big enough to save everyone, but everyone that they can. And this right here, with his parents being not only scientists, but very good, caring, and understanding people, they literally weep for the inhabitants of Krypton, everyone that they can't save. The Ghul family down the street, the Galax, who has had them over for dinner, all the people they have known throughout their lives, some of which they just can't save. And as Kal-El as a child watches this, he goes on to say that rage swelled up within him as he watched his parents weep and cry, and he vividly remembered swearing to himself that when and whatever planet they found themselves on next, he would make it better than this one, better than the situation here on Krypton, no matter what it took. And that same rage, that same conviction still holds true to this day. As we move over back on Earth, Pakistan specifically, we see a red rush, a unrelenting and almost unstoppable force coming into this little outpost space right here, with a bunch of the Peacemakers, this police force of this absolute universe, hunkered down and getting ready for a giant confrontation. Because as we were reminded, 23 people are dead, gunned down, for the very unforgivable crime of just laughing at a man with a gun. One specific Peacemaker massacred a platoon of people, innocent civilians, and this here just set off the rage within Superman. And when Superman is angry and wants something done, there is almost nothing and no one that can stop him. As we see direct evidence of this, him busting through the door, looking for that one specific Peacemaker. Superman, so utterly blinded by rage, he is almost acting on instinct, all while the artificial intelligence in his suit is trying to locate him. But the suit even goes on to say that the Lazarus Corps cyber defenses are of a sophistication beyond this planet's natural capabilities, meaning that specific Peacemaker's whereabouts are heavily encrypted. Of course, we know it's Brainiac behind the scenes controlling everything. Now, we're not sure if that Brainiac is the same one as he is shown in the main DC universe, but as we will find out, he's pretty close. Either way, with him not able to actually find this Peacemaker, he just grabs the nearest person close to him. Going on to say that Christopher Smith, the Peacemaker, he murdered 23 innocent people. Where is Lazarus hiding him? with Superman almost not having control of his own actions. The guy here, this Peacemaker, thinking that Superman is about to just straight up kill him. But in that moment, Kal-El realizes something. That no, he isn't that same little boy on Krypton, helpless to the world around him crashing down. He is in someplace new, someplace different where he himself is a totally different being, and he isn't that same helpless person anymore, causing him to instantly stop and subdue his rage for the moment. Which I think is pretty cool that this absolute Superman, he isn't as refined as your normal Superman would be. Still pretty young and doesn't have a full grip on his powers, so it's almost scary to see when he lashes out. He's almost unpredictable in that way. But eventually the artificial intelligence named Soul in his suit eventually does find this Peacemaker, Christopher Smith, though Brainiac is now trying to reverse counterattack and infiltrate the suit. And it seems like Brainiac wants to speak with this now new Superman. He is giving him a deal, offering Smith's whereabouts in exchange for a little conversation. But with this, we move back over across space and time to the final moments of Krypton, where we see some of the other Kryptonians on the ship that his parents made, adopting and wearing the same type of suits that Superman is wearing here on Earth, made out of the ship itself, meaning if everything was going to be successful, Kal-El would have been among the other dozens of Kryptonians on Earth wearing this specialized gear. But unfortunately, as we see, something goes very wrong, and he is a sole survivor. But even here, as he is taking the last moments to almost say goodbye to the planet itself, he goes on to talk with Krypto, just having a little moment with him, asking, so what do you think the next planet will be like? And just at that time, interrupting a little moment that they had, the ground itself literally starts to shake and explode underneath them. Radiation and green energy, the planet dying itself, erupting from every orifice. And it looks like this is over for little Kal-El, falling into the pits and dying without any type of suit or protection. But it seems like Krypto the dog here isn't just for show, as he saves little Kal-El's life. Thankfully, this little crisis here averted. Unfortunately, you can't really say the same for the rest of Krypton, as there is just riots and chaos everywhere. As you would assume and probably guess, people running everywhere, thrashing around, trying to find safe haven when the planet itself is going to explode. With the comic even going on to say, the higher-ups conspired for months to build enough ships to evacuate the planet. But no, not allowing the normal citizens. These ships were supposed to be built in secret, only for the elites of Krypton to escape, and for everyone else to just die along with the planet. What could Krypton have accomplished in that time if the guilds allowed themselves to work together? Surely more people would have been saved, no doubt. Maybe not all, but as it was, not a single ship managed to take off that day. Not one. At least not one from any of the major cities, as we see his parent ship that they built actually takes off, flying high and almost putting everyone on the ship into space, away from this dying planet and onto a new life elsewhere. But for little Kal-El, things were a little bit different for him. As he goes on to say, the strangest thing happened to me once we took flight. I almost felt a profound calmness wash over me, a confidence that I didn't even know I had. I felt hope. I even think I smiled a little. But as soon as everything is looking up and good for them, it all comes crashing down. As soon as he looks out of the window, he sees it. With the speed of a bullet, ginormous irradiated chunks of Krypton itself. Almost like a bullet fired from a gun the size of a planet. And just like that, the very hope he had was torn away. The massive ship, their only hope, destroyed. All of the Kryptonians on board flailing out and falling. Thankfully though, everyone on board had these very specialized suits, ones that were very high tech even for Kryptonian standards, as they almost function like nanotech, forming around them into their own little mini escape pods. But even still, even when everyone has this little mode of transportation, not everyone is going to make it out. Some of the ships not only crash into each other, but into the debris of the decaying planet. Kal-El even seeing his parents on a distant ship, with us seeing around the planet just how bad everything has gotten. Cities crumble, mountains topple, the entirety of Krypton covered in green smog, completely beyond repair as the planet breathes its final last breaths. That will be the legacy of Krypton, no matter the grandeur or the majesty, no matter the history or the power of science, not even the depth of love. It can all go away, every last speck of it, in an instant. As we seemingly see, Kal-El is the last remaining of the ships, the only one unscathed and made it off the planet. It isn't explicitly said or shown, but from what we can infer, he is the last surviving member of Krypton. He is truly the last son of Krypton. His parents, even down to Krypto his dog, seemingly all gone in a way. As he drifts alone through space, of course following the iconic story of Superman from here on out. Him drifting alone through space onto his new home of Earth. Except now he isn't just an infant baby, now carrying all of the trauma, the hurt, the guilt of witnessing everything he has ever known and loved blown away. Which now, as we come back to the present, just makes his rage in the moment all the more understandable. With him now deciding to pursue different plans, saying, forget Smith, I don't want to know where he is hiding. Because if I know, I'm afraid. Instantly his suit thinking he's afraid of Lazarus. Because yes, given what the suit has learned about Brainiac, he says that Superman's fear is warranted. And with Lazarus under Brainiac's control is up to no good. But no, Superman isn't talking about Lazarus or any of the problems here. He says no, if I get my hands on Smith, I am afraid of what I might do to him. And right now, I just need to be left alone. And mostly, I just need to be reminded of home. As we see this absolute Superman, this almost lost wanderer of this new planet Earth he is on, still grieving and as lost as ever, heading towards Smallville, a place that his mainline counterpart knows very well. But in this universe where everything is different, everything is twisted, who knows what he will find and what he will uncover here in his search for a place, a search for a home. With us initially seeing 6 years ago, right after the explosion and death of Krypton and everybody on it, Superman, for right now, being the lone survivor of his planet, the last Kryptonian. As you can quite obviously see, things are different here than it would traditionally, as he is not an infant, not a baby. He is a growing teen, almost a full-grown adult, by the time he leaves Krypton and arrives on Earth, which is a wildly different change of pace than what the original Superman story was. But us seeing after 17 months of being afloat on the ship, Superman is barely keeping his sanity, his mind teetering on the edge from completely cracking and, breaking his psyche. As you normally would after seeing the death of your entire planet and everyone you have known your entire life, and of course being afloat through space, only thing keeping you company is essentially an AI, an artificial intelligence. And even as the comic goes on to say, over the 9 million light years from Krypton that they have traveled, they have found zero, I repeat, zero inhabitable worlds so far. Clark at this point immediately giving up, thinking that there's nothing out there. Krypton was all there was, their only chance, and they blew it. But in this moment, just then, they see it. Something, or more importantly, somewhere that is going to change his trajectory for life forever. He makes it to the sun, yes, the big bright yellow star orbiting right near Earth. Clark then getting sucked in due to Earth's gravity, and just like that, before we see the initial crash, we move back over where we see the Kents of this universe, which, as you know the story of Superman, from here, you would assumingly know how it goes. Yet even still, we see the lore of this universe, of this family, is completely different. Because here we find out a couple things. One, Jonathan and Martha Kent are essentially working themselves to death on a failing farm, simply because the very shady and evil Lazarus Corporation that almost runs the world, or everything production-wise on it, has been holding back resources, using technology, drones to change the weather, letting their crops die by not giving them the certain amount of rain that they need. Why is this happening? Well, simply because Lazarus wants to purchase this farmland that's been in a Kent's family for generations to put whatever industrial building they want to put on it. But that's the thing, how does two lowly farmers even fight against an entire corporation like this? There's almost nothing they can do. Even as Jonathan Kent goes on to ask, what even type of hope do we have against winning with something like that? Martha responds saying, I don't know, I reckon we need but before she's able to finish, saying a miracle, a savior, that same thing from above comes crashing down in the form of Superman, or right now Clark Kent himself, causing utter chaos and destruction and ending the 9 million light year journey from Krypton. His entire ship and the technology of it being made up of special nanotechnology essentially shifts from being a starship into a suit around Clark himself. As the artificial intelligence in this suit goes on to say that my energy cells have been quite depleted. For now, I must power down and recharge. Leaving Kal-El here, abandoned on an entire new planet alone. And instead of calling the authorities, doing what seemingly most people would do, getting this creature, this unknown entity away from their farm and their homeland, instead here the Kents, being well above the average people in terms of integrity and what they stand for, they decide to bring him in. As they go on to say, this is the miracle we were looking for. He was covered in flames not even a minute ago, but look at him now. What more evidence do we need? Don't you know an angel when you see one? And so we get just that. They bring him in, try to nurse him back to health. Over the course of the next few weeks, we see Clark in and out of consciousness, essentially in a coma, as his body adapts to this new environment, especially one as different as under a yellow sun, as his Kryptonian cells start to get supercharged and his powers manifest, from his super strength to his flight to even his laser eyes burning through everything here. Eventually, it's getting to that teetering point, to the brink where it's almost too much. Jonathan Kent even going on to say, we can't keep doing this, we can't keep him here, because if we do, he is going to be the death of us. But Martha Kent has a little bit of a different outlook on this entire situation, saying that he's just confused, suffering, realizing and sensing that Clark here, or Kal-El, as I guess he isn't Clark yet, has been through something awful. And while the two Kents are here debating about what to do and how to move forward, suddenly Kal-El wakes up and immediately darts off, busting through the house and running through the fields. As it even goes on to say, I started running, tearing through the house and the fields before I even realized I was moving. Somehow, running so blindly fast that the entire world around me was a blur. Me, Kal-El, back on Krypton, I was the slowest kid around. But this isn't Krypton anymore. No, Krypton had exploded in a ball of fire. This was a strange alien world where the sun made me want to claw my skin from my bones. It's interesting because this is almost like a retrospective. We see Clark almost narrating his past experience here when he first landed. As he goes on to say, I would come to learn this place was called Kansas. I have flown 9 million light years, yet somehow, impossibly, it's like I was still back home. Of course, with him being raised in the farming culture and as a farm boy with his parents, this isn't too wildly different than his life back on Krypton. Moving over within the next coming weeks, we see Clark slowly start to adapt and adopt into this new lifestyle on Earth. Of course, helping the Kents around the farm, doing as best he can and using his new extraordinary abilities to move things forward. Each of the Kents thankful for this introduction of Kal-El here and how he is changing their lives for the better. Martha Kent at one point even going on to say, I know you came here searching for something, but it might just be the same thing that we were looking for as well. And I just hope maybe one day we can find it together. Of course, referencing that Kal-El was looking for a home and a new purpose after his home and purpose, Krypton, just exploded and blew up. But of course, he can't just outright explain his entire situation as they speak two entirely different languages. And with the AI of his suit right now currently cut off and damaged, he can't really do anything about it. Until one day, while just working on the tractor, another day here on this farm, just like that, the AI has finally recharged enough and turns back on. Which would be a good thing, you know, but here, this pivotal moment changes everything going forward. As his artificial intelligence named Soul, as we've come to find out, it goes on to say, apologies, my recharging took longer than I anticipated. I fear this system's yellow sun has supercharged your Kryptonian cells in wildly unexpected ways. I should not only be able to help you process and control this new solar energy, but I've also managed to review all of the history of this planet. The people here, they call it Earth, and it's a human civilization. Soul, being this artificial intelligence, basically allows Kal to download the human language into his head, allowing him to not only speak but understand it, and for the first time, allowing him to introduce himself, his true self, to the Kents. After living with them and among them for almost months at this point, they've never truly spoken a word to each other until now. And this is all fine and dandy, but Soul almost takes it too far. As he goes on to say, I've detected some manner of remote drones operating in the skies above, with apparent weather influencing capabilities, so I just took the liberty of disabling them. As of course the many drones that are up above controlling the weather come crashing down into the fields, which I guess makes sense from the perspective of the artificial intelligence. Oh, there's drones up above that's spying on us and changing the weather? Yeah, well, let's get rid of that. But right here, this action, this decision caused drastic changes going forward. Starting off a little positive though, as it starts to rain, you know, the Kent's dying farm, endlessly dry and dying, at least for the first time, it almost feels like hope as it rained for 3 days straight. But at the same time, no one storm would have been enough to save the crops here, but it was something, at least for a singular moment, because as good as this was, it was very brief. As almost immediately we see the army part of Lazarus come in to try and apprehend and see what's going on, and why is there a new person living on this farm with untold capabilities? As soon as they come, they try to apprehend Superman, saying, well, the boy's got no ID or work permit, so we have to take him in for processing. Superman, of course, not just laying down and letting this all happen, he fights back a little bit, resist, trying to, of course, plead his case against Lazarus and the corporation trying to take him in and arrest him, essentially. But his pleas falling on deaf ears, until eventually the Kents just say a few simple words. Son, please just go. And this decision here sends Superman, Kal-El, into absolute anguish. This is the only place so far that he has felt at home. Any semblance of the peace and normal life he has had before his planet, everything he has known, exploded and is now gone. As he goes on to say, I have spent months weeping for Krypton, for everything I have lost. But that day, the tears here were different. I wept for the world I'd found. This one I could already tell I wouldn't be able to save any more than I had the last one. As just like that, he gets up, flies off, leaving the Kents to whatever devices and processing they have to do now, completely altering the iconic origin of Superman. He doesn't grow up with the Kents to this good figure, installing the values that he has. Instead, he is forced to be on his own, wondering and figuring out his own purpose. Him even going on to say this as, For 5 years, he would be on the run, to other farms far away, to factories, to mines, cities where the people were piled on top of each other like trash, islands where you could stay for days and never see another soul. But nowhere on this planet stayed safe, not for long, and no other place felt so much like home as the home the farm with the Kents might have been. And speaking of the Kents, just like that, we take a little bit of a detour and move back to present day, still in the same Kansas area. Instead here, we move over to essentially what is a retirement home, as someone from someplace is specifically looking for Martha Kent, for of course her connection to Kal-El, this new absolute Superman, and this person being none other than Lois Lane, proclaiming that she is just a friend of the family, which couldn't be anything farther from the truth. Clark himself has showed no interest and doesn't even like her. If anything, he wants nothing to do with her or Lazarus in the first place. Of course, him coming to realize that Lazarus, the entire corporation, and what they're doing is the center of all of his pain and anguish on this planet, and all of the wrongdoings as well. And speaking of that, we move over once more to a Lazarus Research and Development Center in the middle of the desert, where we pick up with Brainiac himself, who at this point, if you have been following along the recent issues, Brainiac has almost seemed as the mastermind behind Lazarus, you know, the person in the shadows, controlling the entire corporation, what they do globally, all to himself. But as we will soon find out, he is nothing more than a lackey, a minion to a higher power. As this mysterious person, this boss or final boss of Lazarus, goes on to say, are all the pieces in place. Brainiac confirming that whatever they are planning, yes, it's all set and ready to move forward. This mysterious person goes on to continue saying, I must say, I've often doubted your methods, Brainiac, along with your very sanity. But now, if you deliver what you promised me, Superman, you will ensure your place in the world that is coming to be. Brainiac is going along with this higher power, almost saying, of course, sir, I am just happy to be a servant to the higher cause. With us seeing the figure that is directly speaking coming out of some sort of liquid or pit, this figure goes on to continue saying, salvation is close at hand for the billions upon billions of people on Earth. Once the Superman kneels at the feet of his holy father, Ra's al Ghul. So yes, in a twist that really nobody should have seen coming, of course, the entire corporation is named Lazarus. And who in the DC universe is attached to that name? Of course, it's Ra's al Ghul with his Lazarus Pit, making him Superman's ultimate villain so far in this absolute universe. And to be honest, it kind of does make sense. Ra's al Ghul living hundreds, maybe even thousands of years after trial and error and having almost unlimited life due to the Lazarus Pit, he would naturally reach the conclusion to push his influence worldwide, slowly taking over, slowly building up until we see this global company that is Lazarus and what it is now. Of course, leaving Superman, the Man of Steel, this absolute new being, to potentially be the one to end Lazarus and Ra's al Ghul's reign upon Earth. So if I'm being completely honest here, Brainiac has never been one of my favorite Superman villains or DC characters. Yet here though, in this absolute Superman story, issue number 7, my goodness, I think I fell in love with this absolute Brainiac, because here they make him so much more interesting than, in my opinion, he usually is. And you might have usually expected Brainiac to be, you know, like in space somewhere or off-world in his giant Brainiac ship. But no, he is in the middle of the Nevada desert, his base getting raided and attacked, specifically by the Omega Men group, which is essentially the resistance force or resistance group to the entire Lazarus Corporation which Brainiac works for. Though here in this universe, we see Brainiac is just as intelligent as ever, craziness and psychoticness is dialed up to 15. It's just like that he immediately melts the skin off of one of the intruders, before attacking the rest in a disgustingly brutal fashion, completely taking away the muscular system of one of the intruders and making one of the others throw up all of his blood, organ, and guts. Yeah, it's pretty disturbing. Until eventually getting the last guy, but not killing him, no, just infecting him with special spores meant for Brainiac to do what Brainiac does best, capture and study. As we see this wickedly horrifying, but also pretty dope new Brainiac design. He's almost half cyborg or robot more than he is an actual person. And there is a very specific reason for this, which we will see later on as you get into his actual origin, which almost makes you feel bad for Brainiac, though maybe not too much, considering, you know, he's a homicidal villain and all. Though as you can pretty confidently see, there hasn't been too much of a threat or too intriguing of an opportunity on Earth, more than this Superman, this off-world Kryptonian has been. And assumingly so, Brainiac has studied his fair share of humans up to this point, so he isn't capturing this guy to, you know, find new discoveries, no. As he even goes on to say, he likes to tinker when he's feeling anxious. So pulling and dissecting this poor man apart is nothing more than just calming his nerves. Calming for what, you may ask? Well, it's Superman. It's the only thing that has been on his mind this entire time. The only thing that he just can't quite figure out or capture and control for himself. And Brainiac over in the main DC universe, you know, yes, he is crazy, but he's more of a calm, collected, intellectual crazy, not a lashing out, angry type that we see he is here. Because even going over to some of the iconic bottled cities that, Brainiac captures from all across the universe, he goes on to say that these bottled cities from a dozen different galaxies, and not one of you sludge-brained imbeciles knows a thing about this Superman and where he came from. Even being so fed up and so angry, so rage-fueled, he takes one of the cities, crashing it down and stomping on it like it was an anthill, killing presumably what is the last city and last ones of their kind. And we even see that Brainiac's lust for control isn't just on other people, but even himself, as he even tried to carve this anger, this loss of control part of his mind out of his brain, but he just hasn't had too much success. As Brainiac even continues going on to almost vent to this disfigured and dissected human on the table here, who is in so much pain and agony being pulled apart, he goes on to say that I have got to solve this Superman-shaped puzzle. At least that's what they call him. The boy that can bend steel, leap through clouds, but no one knows who he is or where he comes from. And Ra's al Ghul, his master, or the final boss of this Lazarus corporation, is growing impatient. Brainiac himself even sitting down, taking a moment of breather, as he starts to think about all the events and actions that led him to this point, and how it all began, as we finally get to see the actual origin many years ago. As no, he isn't the original or first Brainiac, far from it. He is actually the 400,000th member or model of this Brainiac project. And I say origin, but it's still kind of vague because this Brainiac that we are following here, this kind of one that is completely insane, isn't even the original. No, he is some sort of clone or robot of the one in charge. This main one, or Brainiac 1, as we will go on to later find out his name is, he goes on to tell this 400,000th Brainiac that he serves a collective. And because Brainiac is so intelligent, he is constantly on the search for knowledge, wanting to know possibly everything there is to know. Though in this universe or in this broken world, everything isn't as clear, and when he doesn't have answers, he fills in the blanks for himself. But here, as his 400,000 Brainiac goes on to ask what even the collective is, Brainiac 1 essentially tells him to not worry about it. There are only 88 levels above him that are allowed to seek knowledge beyond what they were endowed with at creation. And of course, with this new Brainiac here, he is at level 0, and his only real purpose is a shovel, to essentially be a slave to do this one task. Brainiac going on to continue say, you work here and you are never allowed to leave this room. Your function is to dispose of the refuse by shoveling them into the liquidator. Of course, this shovel Brainiac still questioning what exactly is going on and what is a refuse. We found out that what is referred to as refuse are countless other versions of Brainiac, or at the very least, they're lifeless and disposed of bodies. In the response of this Brainiac, the shovel Brainiac that we are following, he goes on to even question, wait, are they not also Brainiac? But Brainiac 1 just says not anymore. So now begin shoveling because you are already behind schedule. With the shoveling Brainiac even going on to ask his work shift, how long is it supposed to last? We find out that he is supposed to stand here and shovel, his only purpose, for his entire life. So with that, with no other purpose, he begins. This Brainiac at this point in time being nothing more than just a cog in the system, just one small piece of the overarching plan of Brainiac 1. But of course, the situation that we are in now opens up so many more questions than it does answer. Because why are there like thousands of other Brainiacs, and why is this shoveling Brainiac number 400,000? And as the days just keep piling on from day 1 to day 2,884, which is about almost 8 years straight, we see that the Brainiac just sits there and doesn't question, does his task as he was created to. Though in the mundane shoveling into the incinerator, a sound rings out, and it's another one of the Brainiacs for the first time actually still alive. But he immediately attacks him. This Brainiac here being the 8 millionth one, and his purpose is to stab and kill millions upon millions of other Brainiac clones or robots or whatever they are, being created for what purpose we don't know, because we only follow behind the scenes, which I find really interesting, and we'll get a greater picture of what's going on in a little bit. But eventually the main Brainiac we have been following gets out on top, confirming his role as the one who shovels, as he is able to defeat and fully kill the other Brainiac that attacked him and continue on, up to about 13,000 days, which is about now like 37 years. And we even see that this Brainiac has seen better days, he is deteriorating, wires, pieces of him slowly falling off, his mind itself breaking to the point of insanity. And of course, up to this point, almost 40 years of no one answering him, his only interaction being shoveling the dead bodies of essentially what is himself, and even being attacked by a few of them. Yeah, that would drive almost anybody insane. So like I said, this Brainiac starts to fill in the gaps for himself, as eventually he creates his own collective, a council, a group of other Brainiacs who he asks questions to try and fill in the gaps about what is going on. Of course, all of this being within his twisted and crazy brain of his, he only gets the answers he wants to hear. As when he goes to ask them, am I a refuse? He almost imagines the council saying, no, you're special. You're not one of them. You are unique. even going as far as to call this little council, this makeshift props of dead bodies of other Brainiacs, his friends. So when we move further into the future on day 49,000, over a century worth of this Brainiac just doing his job, we see eventually he is completely done. He has cleared up the entire area, the once hundreds or thousands of different bodies gone, meaning they have stopped being poured in. Whatever is going on outside of this little area that he has been, something is happening and something has changed. So he lets his curiosity get the better of him and finally decides to go out to see what's going on. As he goes on to wonder the ship, seeing all the tech and previous achievements the main Brainiac or whatever other Brainiacs before him completed while he was just being on shovel duty for, about 130 years. Until eventually he gets to the head of the ship where he sees it, Brainiac 1. But no, not alive, dead, with a blaster in his hand, meaning for whatever happened, whatever this Brainiac seen or whatever they were searching for, this Brainiac 1, the original, couldn't take it anymore and decided to take himself out, to unalive himself. Which is pretty bleak and dark when you think about it, leaving this one insane, broken, twisted version of Brainiac after hundreds of years being a slave, basically, as the one and only true Brainiac left. With him even going on to say, "That day I shoveled my last piece of refuse. Then officially I promoted myself to level 100. But most importantly, I remember seeing the stars for the very first time, and just staring at them until my eyes began to melt, staring and wondering what else was out there. And ever since, I have carved my mark across the face of creation, across countless worlds. I have sometimes paused to consider the possibility that it would have been better for everyone, me included, if I had just stayed in that room with that shovel. But because that's not the course of events that occurred and what really happened, we see this Brainiac move on, and now actually contacting the Brainiac Collective themselves. Now, like I said, this just brings up more questions than being answered, because this Brainiac Collective, it's unclear if they are just more clones, the successful ones like him, or if there's something different entirely, because each of them are very distinct and different than Brainiac himself. Some of them being very alien in appearance, being more machine than man, even a female version of a Brainiac, so they're pretty varied, in their origin unclear. Either way though, this broken Brainiac, as we go to follow, sanctioned and called everybody here for one purpose: to question about Superman, the one enigma, the one mystery he can't quite solve and is driving him insane, or at least more insane than he already is. After collecting a little bit of the red dust that his costume gives off, he gives the council his findings, and they essentially go to call him an idiot, These readings have to be fake. No being in the known universe possesses this manner of abilities. In the council here, the Brainiacs, they collect all knowledge across the universe, so if anything, they would know. Being very angry at this insane Brainiac for wasting their time over idiotic findings, until just one, the female Brainiac that I have mentioned before, she goes on to say Krypton, a planet in the Rio section. Your dust sample matches Krypton's thermal signature. But that's it, because Krypton is no more. It exploded. No Brainiac has ever even stepped foot on the planet because, it never really warranted the interest of the collective. Whoever its people were essentially idiots, They never even managed to develop interstellar travel. But there was a Brainiac who went in the destroyed space where Krypton was and collected a few samples of the exploded planet, the green irradiated pieces floating around. So after giving Brainiac the sample to recreate in his lab here, he ends the transmission and goes back to the man, the person he has tied up and has been essentially tinkering on ever since. Even going on to thank him and calling him his friend, and how he has been very helpful because he is a good listener. But that sample he was provided, he is able to recreate it, and it creates a green glowing rock. Yes, the iconic Kryptonite, in the possession of the one man who was more obsessed with Superman than any other person in the known universe, this insane Brainiac. Which is horrible news, if Brainiac is able to just mass produce Kryptonite in his lab, that kind of takes away the whole thing of Kryptonite being rare and such a deadly weakness for Superman if it can just be mass produced. But later on, as you move further into his lab, we see that the Omega Man, the intruder from earlier, wasn't the only person he has been tinkering on. No, Peacemaker Smith, the one guy who mowed down the group of civilians from before in the previous issue, he is here as well. But this Peacemaker has a very specific, more intentional purpose than the intruder did before. That intruder was just playtime, Brainiac was doing that because he was bored and he likes death and destruction because he's kind of insane. Here though, as a Peacemaker goes on to say, what is this punishment for? Is this for what I did in Pakistan? Brainiac simply says quite the contrary. Director Ghul was very impressed with your work, so you're being trusted with a very special deployment to what is soon to be the most dangerous war zone on the planet, a place called Kansas. Yes, this twisted Brainiac has done his due diligence on Superman in his story, so now he is heading to the one place he arrived when he first arrived on Earth, and now he is setting up and giving this Peacemaker here some new tech imbued with the power of the green radiated kryptonite that he has just found before, turning this lowly Peacemaker into what logically would be this absolute version of Metallo. So yes, absolute Metallo versus absolute Superman is going to be pretty crazy once we get to it. But Ra's al Ghul, a villain and name more traditionally associated with Batman more than any other hero or character within the DC universe, instead here he is the antithesis in everything that absolute Superman has been fighting against, because he's the head and creator of this Lazarus corporation. Us even seeing his apartment getting attacked by some of the Omega Men coming to assassinate and kill him, though as we can obviously see and find out, they're woefully unprepared of just how much of a threat Ra's al Ghul truly is, even without his whole company, army, and advanced technology. The Omega Men assassins here even being confused about this fact, as one goes on to say that he's just one man. If we can kill him here, we can save the planet. In which he promptly kicks that same Omega Men into one of the mini Lazarus pits he has here in his apartment, dousing him in this mysterious purple fluid. As he continues to effortlessly fight and defend himself, he even goes on to explain and give us a little bit of a lore drop about not only him, but Lazarus and his absolute Earth as a whole, such as how he has started this company 200 years ago, and I assume that he has been alive this long through actually the Lazarus pits and Lazarus fluids, as we were going to see in a second, that yes, they do have some properties against or even helping with aging. But he continues saying, I've never imagined I might live long enough to fulfill my company's ultimate goal of resurrecting the world, because he sees the world differently. You know, he has had an extended time period on this earth, so instead of seeing the progress in industry as the common man might see, only he could see the earth for what it truly was, a maggot-riddled carcass, as it was heedlessly rotting into. And this burden would fall onto him alone to bring this ravaged, overpopulated planet back to life, which his motives kind of remind me of MCU Thanos, in the sense of, you know, he sees this, well, I guess in Thanos' case it was the universe at large, but he sees this populace, this place where overpopulated, they're fighting for resources and everything's just corrupted and not as it should be, so he's gonna come in, kill off or destroy the corrupted part or the overpopulated part, and then let the rest of the people, the planet, the universe, whatever, flourish and rejuvenate. Though instead of achieving this with a snap of his fingers using universal artifacts, he instead is using it through the worldly company Lazarus, in which Ra's al Ghul kind of has a little bit of a god complex, as maybe even literally, as once he picks up the other soldier, the one who was doused in that purple chemicals and fluids, we see that the Lazarus pit here literally de-aged him, going from a grown man to a little child within the span of like a minute, 30 seconds even. Ra's al Ghul continuing on saying, a long time ago the name Ra's al Ghul struck fear into the heart of the masses. The demon's head is what they called me, but just like Lazarus, I was reborn. So now you may call me the God's head. And his main priority, or that's at least what he's telling himself, is to save the planet from the billions who just leech off of it and would bleed it dry. Which, in overview, just seems like a pretty good goal. Though his rendition of doing this is through blood, murder, and just utter chaos and evil, walking the used-to-be grown man soldier, this now infant baby, off to the balcony, holding him above the city, before going to literally just drop the child and let it plummet to its would-be death. So yeah, our first introduction to Ra's al Ghul in the fullest extent is pretty rough and pretty dark. But things aren't really better over with Clark, or I guess Kal-El, as he isn't really Clark yet. As we move over back to Kansas, Smallville, we see him meeting with his Earth Mother, Kal-El going on to tell the elderly Martha Kent all about his adventures, places he has been over the years and recent past, even bringing back some collectibles for her. But unfortunately, as we see, she isn't in the best of state. Her dealing with some sort of dementia, or Alzheimer's more specifically, she forgets who Kal-El even was, confusing him with the Jonathan Kent, who at this point we still don't know what actually happened to him. But the whole thing here is just traumatic for Superman, as eventually he leaves and it just puts him in an even worse state than he already was. Because as he's walking down the streets of the small town in Smallville, we see that he isn't alone, and it's not just any other civilians or random people, but it's people specifically following him. And I say people plural because it's Jimmy Olsen, you know, one of the members of the Omega Men group, and Lois Lane, part of the Lazarus Corporation, at least for now at this point. Each of them here to essentially recruit Superman and his great abilities and what he stands for their cause. Well, more so with Jimmy Olsen and the Omega Men than Lois Lane. She is still kind of working on her own and for her own personal gain, just trying to figure out what it exactly is this Superman rather than recruiting him for Lazarus. Regardless of their motives, Superman wants nothing of this. There's just too many things going on in not only his life and his mind, but the world around him to be boggled down with almost the politics of these two different factions going to war, even though it is for the actual safety and greater all well-being of the planet itself. And as these two sides, Lois and Jimmy, start to argue and bicker back and forth, it gets to a point where Superman just has enough, going into full hero mode or full battle mode, if you will, activating his suit and stepping in, telling them to stop. The whole reason he is here in Smallville looking for closure is because of Peacemaker Smith, the same one that murdered all those innocent people back in Pakistan. He came here in hopes of finding another solution, finding almost peace within himself and stopping himself from going out and straight up just killing him, because it would be so easy. Why, especially in this absolute universe where death and chaos is just so rampant and simple and almost second nature to all of the people here, why shouldn't Superman just indulge in the same kind of activities? He doesn't have the same moral compass or the same upbringing that normal Clark would, where he would stop himself from taking a life unless it's the absolute last resort. Though this moral dilemma or line of questioning isn't going to be thought further, as suddenly there's a loud sound ringing out and Clark is shot. Yes, shot by the only thing truly capable of taking him out as fast as it can, Kryptonite bullets. As just then more Lazarus agents and Peacemakers start to arrive. They've been tracking him this entire time, putting him in the right situation for him to be distracted and of course fired upon. So of course this is a dire situation. You know, Superman is literally dying if he doesn't get help soon. So Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane put their differences aside for a second to help Superman and form a loose alliance. And they might have had hope to get Superman out of the situation if all they were fighting against were normal peacemakers and normal soldiers. But it seems like they have a new addition to their team. The Peacemaker Smith from before, now with cybernetic upgrades and whatever have you, basically becoming this absolute version of Metallo, even though his design is wildly different and more Brainiac inspired if anything, which, because it actually was, Brainiac did experiment and built him back up into what he is now. So yeah, the only person, this specific Peacemaker, who Superman truly wanted to end the life of, is now coming to do it first as Superman. And it seems like it's going to be way easier than it should be because the Kryptonite bullet, is something he has never dealt with before. Even the hyper-advanced intelligent suit of his still can't figure out what exactly is this piece of material within him, and why is it just easily piercing not only the suit's armor, but Superman's super durable and super powered skin as well. But again, there's no time, as his upgraded Peacemaker tracks the bullet and where it fired, finding Superman hidden here, immediately starting their battle. This Peacemaker Smith at his strongest and Superman potentially at his lowest and weakest, as they just start to pummel and attack each other. But Superman tries his best to defend himself and take down this Peacemaker, but his suit even goes on to say that Peacemaker Smith's abilities appear to have been significantly upgraded, and the solar energy within your cells, you know, the thing giving him his powers, is being rapidly depleted by the bullet's radiation. This battle, if prolonged, could literally kill him. So the only option to get out of this alive is to end it as quickly as possible, to disable his implants. But that is, of course, way easier said than done, because this Peacemaker is just ferocious. He's just not letting up, punching him in the wound spot where he got shot. And even as Kal-El starts to use his frost breath, boom, instantly hit in the mouth at full force, temporarily downing him and knocking him out. Before he can get beat further, just then Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane step onto the battlefield to at least try to defend their miracle man, as they go on to call him. Lois even trying to use her authority and rank within Lazarus to tell the other Peacemakers to arrest this upgraded one here, though he kind of serves a higher power, if you will, taking direct orders from Brainiac himself, and not just whatever other commanding officer within Lazarus ranks. And the situation gets even more crazy, as just then the actual citizens and people of this Smallville town come charging in with guns. After seeing all the destruction and the fight going on, you know, they've had enough and decided to defend what's theirs, defend their hometown. But during this confusion and almost standstill, another one of the Peacemaker soldiers goes to confront Smith here, saying, "Our orders are explicitly clear. We are to bring in Superman alive and not, you know, killed or hurt. So let's just grab him during all this confusion and get out of here." But this upgraded Peacemaker here had no intentions to follow the rules. He fully intended to kill Superman here, even against all the wishes of his higher-ups and even Brainiac himself. So yeah, that just goes to show you how mentally insane he is. Not that it was in question before, because, you know, you have to have a lot of screws loose to just murder a bunch of civilians and normal people just for laughing at you. But all of these side things served a greater purpose. It gave time for Superman to catch a second wind, as he does just that, punching the Peacemaker with so much force, downing him and making him draw blood, as he now reintroduces himself in his full-on battle mode, which just looks pretty sick. You know, there's like energy coursing or heat off of his body, lightning or crackles of energy going all throughout. So like a force of nature, he just descends upon not only the Peacemaker, the upgraded one here, but all of the other people in the battlefield, initiating something called tornado mode, which just swarms the battlefield in a red sea of the nanobots of his suit, while he just starts to pummel and unload upon the upgraded Peacemaker, punching him hundreds of times, 1,000 to be specific, in 30 seconds, which is good. He seems to be winning, but all of this comes with one very big caveat. You know, even though Superman was shot and the Kryptonite bullet is still inside of him, he is slowly dying and being poisoned by the radiation, he is still holding back. And even the upgraded Peacemaker here takes notice of this, going on to say, all of that power, and look at you, afraid of your own rage. Those people in Orangetown, the people I mowed down and killed, Lazarus promoted me for it. And you have my bullet inside of your chest killing you, and yet you still hold back. Which everything Peacemaker is saying here is true, and just goes to further taunt and enrage the Superman even further as he gears up for one more punch, saying not anymore, he's not going to hold back, putting everything into this attack, going to what I would assume to kill Peacemaker here. Though this newfound aggression and newfound anger and power is just too little too late, as Peacemaker has had time to pull out his trump card, more of the Kryptonite that he shot him with at the beginning, unloading shot after shot into him. It's just too much for this battle suit, this battle mode of his to handle. The Kryptonian levels start spiking up. And all throughout the chaos, while he has Superman dead to rights, Peacemaker, like an idiot, goes on to reveal the ultimate secret. The secret of the man who is in charge behind everything of Lazarus, even above Brainiac himself, Ra's al Ghul's name. Him going on to continue saying that that's God's secret name. Brainiac has told him as such, and God says all we have to do to save the world is murder a whole bunch of people. As he goes to aim the last Kryptonite bullet at Superman's head, fully intending to kill Kal-El here and now. Or he would have, at least, if, he wasn't an idiot and actually followed orders, as this entire time Brainiac has been watching. Brainiac, who of course wants to study Superman, one of the last Kryptonians in existence and someone who has immense power, so he shuts him down from the inside out, telling him that he belongs to Brainiac and Brainiac is always watching, and that Superman is not to be killed, instantly rendering him unconscious and not a threat for now, which only really leaves one bigger problem, Superman has still been shot and Kryptonite is still in his system, meaning he's still dying, and they just can't take him to any sort of hospital or somewhere to get treatment, because Lazarus owns everything for the next couple miles. So that only leaves one other option, at least in this dire times. They have to go with the Omega Men, as just then Jimmy Olsen orders for backup in the cavalry as they open a boom tube, in which a bunch of the other agents and other soldiers of the Omega Men rush out and start fighting against the other Peacemakers here. Though it is interesting and most obvious what would happen, they refuse to let Lois Lane come with them because she is still working for Lazarus, even though she doesn't now fully agree with their core ideals and will soon splinter off after seeing what she has seen. The Omega Men, and more specifically what seems to be their leader, Primus, just doesn't trust her and almost downright dislikes her, so they leave Lois here to deal with whatever consequences will come from it, and eventually the boom tube closes and they're out of there. Everything just went left field so fast. Superman is still dying, and who knows if they can even get the Kryptonite out. He is now also with the Omega Men, a mysterious group who we don't fully understand yet, and Lois Lane is captured again by Lazarus and about to undergo whatever punishment or whatever repercussions of her actions. Ever since arriving on Earth, Superman, or Absolute Superman, has had a pretty interesting time and upbringing as a version of Superman, yet here he is tested even more than ever before, slowly being corrupted by Earth, its problems, its people, into potentially becoming the son of the demon. But before we see how that plays out, him slowly siding with the villains and adopting and taking in their ideals, he has to actually make it there alive, as currently he's being poisoned and fighting for his very life after being shot by a Kryptonite bullet, which for this Absolute Superman is the first time he has ever had to deal with something like this. Of course, being forced to work with the Omega Men as they treat him and try to find out what's going on, as no one so far has even heard of Kryptonite or what it does to Kryptonians such as Superman. Heck, they don't even know Superman is an alien or what he's truly capable of. So as they go to do some makeshift surgery on Kal-El, him being wide awake and not unconscious during it, they're eventually able to get one of the two pieces of the Kryptonite bullets out of his system, yet the second one is still stuck inside of him, its form being unstable. It's slowly coming apart and turning from the bullet form into almost like a Kryptonite liquid that's going to infect the system and eventually just straight up kill him if they don't get it out. And with his very life in the balance, Superman decides he can do a better job himself, taking the tweezers and literally performing surgery on himself while awake and bleeding out and being affected by the Kryptonite. The pain and agony is so great, Kal even says it feels like Krypton is dying all over again, but inside of him. Eventually though, he is of course able to get the Kryptonite fragment out of him, as then he succumbs to the pain and passes out. Though that solves the Kryptonite problem, that still leaves the effects of it, as he still has two gaping holes in his chest as he is bleeding out and dying fast. And if they don't hurry up and somehow able to patch him up, they're going to lose the last Kryptonian ever, possibly in the universe, with Superman even going on to think, if I die, then the last vestige of my home dies with me, Krypton. That's what this bullet is trying to kill. So I fight right now to do what I failed to do before. I fight to save Krypton. But this time he is not alone, as the Omega Men here, the group, has a very secret and powerful weapon, which is just a clue that's going to lead into a very big reveal going forward, as it obviously would be if you just think about it for a second. But they pull out some strange device, a father father box, using it on Superman, allowing it in its strange energies to heal him and fix him up. But with Superman now in stable condition, that just leaves some of the other loose ends, if you will, to be tied up in what's going on with them, as in Lois Lane here, after being recaptured by Lazarus from her betrayal and going against them, to side with Superman, but now being visited by the head and almost religious figure in this universe, Ra's al Ghul, the mastermind and final boss of everything Lazarus related. Him opening Lois's cell, telling her that you will answer my questions as if your life depended on it, giving her the whole intimidation spill, yada yada yada. But all of this isn't anything new to Lois Lane. She was a Lazarus higher up and a pretty good officer when she worked for them. As she goes on to spill out everything that Ra's al Ghul was going to convey, as she goes on to say that you never show your face in public, so you wanted me to be especially impressed that you came all the way here just to tell me that despite my arrest in Kansas and betrayal of Lazarus, I'm not being fired, nor am I allowed to quit. You're here to remind me that I work for Lazarus, for you, and that there's still work that needs to be done. To encourage my allegiance, you're going to remind me that you literally own my father's legs, the advanced prosthetics that he has, and that if you wanted to, you could disable him with a flip of a switch. And of course, she was correct. That is essentially what all he was going to say, but there is one minor detail that she has left out. That no, Ra's al Ghul, the final boss, if you will, isn't just going to flip a switch and disable him. If Lois Lane fails him once more, Ra's al Ghul will put her father out of his misery with his own bare hands. And with that, Lois Lane just snaps, lunging forward with a knife, aimed at his throat to finally kill him and take him out. But Ra's al Ghul only has 2 words. Do it. Open my throat, kill me, and I promise you I will rise again tomorrow. But can you say the same? You, Lois, hold your father's life in your own hands. Remember your love for him as you fulfill your duty and bring me my son, of course referring to Superman, which is really interesting and is going to be expanded upon later. But Ra's al Ghul is set on the idea of Superman, Kal-El, this alien, being his son, becoming the new son of the demon head, as he is widely known and referred to as. But from here on out, we take a little bit of a time jump. Skipping over weeks ahead into the future, Superman has allied himself with the Omega Men. Of course, because they have 1, saved his life, and 2, they are seemingly taking the fight to the Lazarus Corporation and trying to do good, even if we are going to see that it's a little twisted in how they're trying to do it. And the first reason why is as they raid another one of Lazarus's base in an army camp, the Omega Men, specifically Omega Prime, their leader, is about to slice down and kill one of the Peacemakers, but it's instantly stopped by Superman, as of course, Superman has a no-kill rule, and that even extends to his allies even in all-out war, and Absolute Superman is no different from all of the other Supermans, as he even goes on to say, you saved my life, and I am grateful, but if you insist on using deadly force, you'll wish you have just left me to die. In which, yeah, normally this would be a grueling battle for the Omega Men and their group against the Lazarus, but Superman is just a well-oiled machine, a powerhouse, so he just zooms in and does it all alone, completely soloing this entire base. No matter what kind of defense, weapons, and abilities the Lazarus Corporation might have, Superman just plows through them all, even taking time to self-reflect while all of the equipment and tanks are just burning due to the suit's power and expending some of his solar energy. He lets his guard down a little bit too much, as he is then just grabbed by some powerful machines as they start to literally pull him apart from every end of his body. And even while this is happening, his suit, Soul, the almost artificial intelligence in it, goes on to tell Kal, as he activates his self-defense mode, that your wounds are opening, they're bleeding again, and no matter what happens, you cannot allow the Omega Men to use that device on you once more. You must never go near that box again. Yes, the Father Box, which is obviously connected in some way or fashion to Darkseid, in which this absolute Darkseid inside of this absolute universe, he kind of, well, he is the universe. He fully merged with it, and everything in this universe is his perverted and altered take on the main DC universe. And so after the battle, while they're back at their base, we see Superman talking with Jimmy Olsen about said box. Primus, their leader, no one really knows what the box is and what it can truly do. Some people say it fell from space. Somebody else said it was dug up here on Earth where it had been buried for millions of years. But all that Primus says is that it comes from God, which this line right here just throws everything in question. If the seemingly good guys, the Omega Men, if their leader is calling the Father Box a device usually created by Darkseid and forces of Apocalypse, if she's saying it comes from God and Darkseid is their God, that just throws everything, their motive, what they're trying to do, into question. Because Superman even goes on to say that the box is kind of sentient, and it has a name. It told him its name. It's called a Father Box. As it was removing the final pieces and healing him up, it also showed him visions. He saw an entire planet, a world on fire, erupting with flames. Fire pits the size of oceans. Slums that were packed with tortured masses, which obviously sounds like some sort or version of Apocalypse, you know, the planet that Darkseid is usually from and rules. But Superman goes on to say that no, this isn't a vision of the past or some faraway planet, it's the world that's coming, this world, Earth, some sort of premonition of the future. Of course, Jimmy Olsen goes to rationalize this, saying what you saw was clearly what'll happen if you don't stop Lazarus. He then gets into the entire reason why he wanted to become an Omega Man in the first place, to stop and defend the world from all the evils and corruption and bad stuff that plagues the planet. Even going as far as to name drop one of the few times he has been called this. He names the Joker as some of the things that he has found out during his travels and some of the information he knows from being an Omega Man. And speaking of corruption, it seems like the Peacemakers are back at it again. There's a protest going on back over in Pakistan, the same town where the Peacemaker Smith, who's currently this universe's version of Metallo, he shot and massacred an entire group of people. And now more Peacemakers are on the scene to quell this protest and possibly kill more innocent civilians. And so when they get there, Superman isn't too kind or happy in the slightest, taking out more of his rage, his built up anger at not only this situation, but the world, this Earth that he has now found himself on. Again, just letting loose to a point, you know, he's not killing anybody, but he's making them very close and wishing they were dead. The AI in his suit, Soul, even going on to further say and confirm that the father box, the device from before, is extremely dangerous. And now he only has really limited sentience, so he cannot truly understand and grasp the emotions of being frightened or scared, but it is Kal-El who should be scared of what this clearly corrupted world and people might do to him, or the sort of man he is starting to turn into, which is all well and good advice, but Superman has a little bit of a different perspective. As he goes on to say, Soul, you saved my life, you're all I have left of Krypton, but I'm getting awfully tired of people telling me who I am when I don't even know who I am myself. So do me a favor and just shut up. As he gets done just eviscerating and almost incinerating, dripping with lava and power after destroying all of the Peacemakers present on the battlefield. But he keeps pushing on to find where these civilians and where these protesters are. But even as he does so, he even thinks to himself, every day I spend under the sun on this planet, I grow stronger, angrier, further removed from who I used to be and who I was. And the situation and what he's about to see does not make this any better in the slightest, as he sees just the people, the innocent people, the civilians hung, murdered by the Peacemakers and the Lazarus Corporation, seemingly for fun. And once again, this just goes to further radicalize and anger Superman. So when backup arrives and more Peacemakers arrive, Primus just starts lashing out, cutting, you know, doing her thing, almost killing some of them, all while Superman does nothing and just watch, seething with anger. She even goes as far as to pull out a weapon right in front of Superman, shooting one of the Peacemakers point blank. Now it's left kind of ambiguous what happened. Did Superman finally succumb to the hopelessness of trying to better the people here and just let her start killing the bad guys, even though some of them clearly might deserve it for their actions? But we eventually find out that no, Superman, using his super speed, was able to catch the bullet and stop her from killing, but he hesitated. He almost didn't. He's so close to being pushed far enough to join this corrupted planet in this war instead of rising above, sticking to his morals as Superman should. And they even get into a little argument about this. Prime is going on to tell Superman that he is sent here for a reason, and to stop something like Lazarus, you don't fight something like them by pulling your punches. She can see the anger inside of him begging to come out. All he has to do is just kill one man, Ra's al Ghul. Side with her to kill him. One death to save millions. No, billions of lives. Of course, all this is going to confuse Superman even more, pushing him more into uncertainty, but as this argument goes on, they realize something. They left a man behind. Not just anyone, Jimmy Olsen himself, as he is now deep inside of enemy territory, completely captured and being interrogated by Lazarus, specifically Lois Lane. And Superman has taken a liking to Jimmy Olsen. He's one of the only people inside of the Omega Man group that he truly trusts more than the others. Certainly not their leader, Primus. So when he goes missing, they decide to launch a full-on attack on Lazarus and their head. Moving over to the Greenland, one of their main Lazarus research facilities, we see just absolute chaos reigning through. Superman coming here in a fit of rage, moving like a force of nature, a hurricane, just mowing through Lazarus's best defenses. All while Ra's al Ghul himself watches from inside. This was all planned by Brainiac because director Al Ghul has wanted to meet his so-called son, even down to the location of where this is, because Brainiac has been running millions of simulations a minute. He's finally deduced and figured out that Superman's absorption of solar energy seems to be the source of his very power. So when you send him to a place like this where the sun won't rise for the next 30 days, slowly but surely as he depletes himself, he won't be as strong as he could be. He'll exhaust his solar reserves. But if there's one thing that we come to find out that Ra's al Ghul hates, it's brokenness and weakness. He doesn't want Superman weakened. He wants to fight him at his strongest. In his own words, he wants to make Superman whole. So when this universe's version of Italo comes in, Peacemaker Smith, he is tasked with getting his revenge and having another shot at Superman, though this time he is told not to hold back, fully fight with full force and fight to kill, Ra's al Ghul even handing him more Kryptonite to go against the Man of Steel once more. Because what good is a son to the all-powerful, if you will, Ra's al Ghul, if he's weak and dies in battle against someone like Peacemaker Smith here? No. If he's going to be an Al Ghul, the son of the Demon Head, then he needs to be strong and he needs to prove it. But I mean, outside, you would be a fool not to see he's doing exactly that, just raining down hellfire upon anybody standing in his way. Though the caveat, even as Brainiac points out, they're quite still alive. Superman hurts and stuns but doesn't kill them, just stranding them miles away from the battlefield. And so phase 2 of Brainiac's, or more specifically Ra's al Ghul's plan, kicks into action, the Omega Men arriving to the battlefield to make things even more messy and chaos. Lois Lane still capturing Jimmy Olsen, who of course isn't fully malicious and is trying to get Jimmy out so they can refine Superman. And lastly, this Metallo is finally here to get his rematch against Superman. But Superman obviously can hear this, super hearing and all. He says, "I hear him coming," hearing the roar of his jetpack, his heart pounding in his chest. Peacemaker Smith is coming to kill me. He has a bullet in his gun that would do the job, forged from the rubble of my dead homeworld, Kryptonite. And in their battle before, in Smallville, he almost succeeded. He's killed before, and he's been rewarded for doing it. And he will keep on killing unless he is stopped, which as soon as he flies up to confront Superman in the sky, as fast as he went up there is as fast as he comes down, dropping like a fly. Superman even going on to further say that his armor is advanced alien technology, beyond anything that this planet should be capable of producing. It has been laced throughout his entire body, one that has transformed this Christopher Smith into one of the most single powerful humans on the face of the earth. But that's the thing, Superman is not human. As we see his beaten and mangled body, Superman beat him senseless in about 4 seconds, just showing you how powerful a dead serious Superman is. Before, this battle was somewhat close, but now 4 seconds, instantly down and defeated. But that won't stop him, will it? Not for good anyway. As long as he is breathing and as long as he is alive, he's going to keep coming back and keep attacking and killing if he gets the chance. Superman even going on to note just how easy it would be to end him here. With a little more than a blink, he could use his heat vision to microwave his brain, leaving him just as a drooling idiot, lobotomizing him, or with a puff of his breath, he can shatter his body so he'd never walk again. And even though it would be so easy for him to do so, it just goes to show you how absolute and moral of a character Cal is. Because as a normal human, it's already hard enough to do the best you can do in life and be as good as you should, even when in some instances doing the right thing seems to be the least optimal. Now imagine that same dilemma, but now you have the power to crush and level mountains with your bare hands, truly being invincible to most things on the entire face of Earth. Yet in spite of that, he chooses mercy. He chooses to spare this Peacemaker Smith, even to the enragement of Primus here, declaring that if Superman can't kill him, I'll do it myself, which again, he stops her as well. And this is kind of her breaking point, going on to call Superman nothing but a soft little coward, that you still decide to save him after everything he has done. But again, things get even more crazy once now Ra's al Ghul and the rest of Lazarus' forces arrive to them right here, telling Primus, "How dare you speak to him that way? That is the son of the demon," of course referring to himself. And no, he's not his son by blood, but he will become his son one way or another. And even as this Peacemaker Smith, or Metallo, whatever you want to call him, he thought he was the chosen one, the hero in this story. But Ra's al Ghul makes something very clear to him, that he is nothing more than essentially just a sheep in wolf's clothing. A wolf would not be lying here, quivering and broken. He embodies more of the weakness and brokenness that Ra's al Ghul just despises. So Ra's al Ghul picks up his Kryptonite gun to end him once and for all, and the weakness he hates. But Superman, even knowing this, still doesn't want death on the battlefield, lunging in front of the Kryptonite bullet, being shot and affected by Kryptonite once more, weakened even further. And this is where everything changes, where everything becomes clear about who's who and what's truly the motive in doing all of this. Ra's al Ghul going on to say, "My son, I know what you're feeling. You are angry at the state of the world, and we will use that anger, you and I, to save this planet from itself, to remake this world. Isn't that what you want, my son?" But of course, Kal-El goes on to say, "I am not your son." And yeah, perhaps he isn't right now, but Ra's al Ghul is still under the firm belief that, yeah, not now, but he will be. As just then he is stabbed in the back by a Kryptonite knife by none other than Primus herself, seemingly betraying him. And no, not just Superman, but attacking Lois and even her own Omega Men, her own army. As Ra's al Ghul continues saying and making clear that you're right, you're not worthy of being called my son, a child of an Al Ghul. Not yet, but we will teach you. We, as in your sister and I, Talia al Ghul, as we finally find out that Primus, the leader of the Omega Men group, the opposition to the Lazarus Corp, was nothing more than a fake disguise. There are no good guys in this war or on this planet. It is just evil and eviler. Talia al Ghul, the daughter of Ra's al Ghul, was simply just playing along, doing all of this to what I assume to have Superman join their cause, because that's what the Father Box has told them. They serve the will of the Father Box. They serve the will of Darkseid. Pretty obvious now when you think about it, because their whole group is literally called the Omega Men. You know, Omega, like the Omega effect, the source of what is usually Darkseid's power, which is just a crazy twist and turn of events. Even in an entirely different universe where things are completely different, Superman still can't escape Darkseid and his effects. And we begin in what is essentially a dream sequence. Kal-El is not only back as a child, but back on Krypton. And we know this is specifically a dream sequence and not actually happening because back on Krypton before it blew up, what his parents did technically was illegal, but they were never judged or put on trial because of it. And likewise, we also find out that being an orphan is also illegal on Krypton. So because his parents get taken away, that makes young Kal-El here guilty, sentenced to 20 years in confinement inside of the Phantom Zone. And obviously the set of circumstances here aren't right or morally just, and Kal-El gets enraged because of it, letting his fury out and burning and destroying everybody here. Though in the real world, we see Superman is hooked up to a giant machine, undergoing surgery by Brainiac, while inside of a Lazarus research facility under the project name Son of the Demon. This, of course, being day one. And here we find out more accurately, it isn't dreams per se, but specifically induced visions, memories, things of the past meant to enrage Superman and push him forward. Him being put in every vile and stressful situation over and over again until his mind breaks and he snaps. Because this has been the 575th time in the last 6 hours that Kal-El has just mentally murdered the entire ruling class of his home planet Krypton. All of this done by Brainiac to please Ra's al Ghul. Because in most iterations of the DC universe, Superman is one of the most powerful metahumans, superheroes, whatever you want to call him, on the face of the planet. And here in the absolute universe, that is no different. So of course, once you have this ultra powerful person, people like Ra's al Ghul is going to want to use him as a tool. But for that to happen, Superman has to work willingly with him. Because think about it, the easiest way for someone to commit atrocities and things they would never normally do is to make them see your point, for them to agree with you. And he's trying to do that with Superman, just artificially making his mind snap and then aligning himself with Ra's al Ghul. But Brainiac isn't the most qualified person to do this. I mean, yes, he's intelligent and most technological savvy, but the last person he toyed with and infused turned out a hollow version of their previous self, of course referring to Peacemaker Smith. And here that is the last thing Ra's al Ghul wants. Superman, if he is to be his son, the son of the demon, he has to be fully whole and fully intact. All he has to do is make the boy see the truth, how Ra's al Ghul is the truth. If Superman truly wishes to save this world from ruin, its path to salvation lies through Ra's al Ghul. And I know this is a question that some people had before with Brainiac and his relation to Ra's al Ghul. Why is he even working for him? Surely Brainiac, being a 12th level intellect, a super genius in of his own, why couldn't he just come up with a plan to take dominance and rule from Ra's al Ghul, or just leave him to go do his own devices? And the simplest answer we find out is because they possess an ultimate weapon, the Father Box, a piece of technology so advanced, so powerful that even Brainiac is afraid of it, going on to tell them that yes, Superman will be the wrath of the All Ghouls made flesh. You have my word, all I ask is that you keep that box away from me. Which makes sense. This is Darkseid's own universe, so a tool of Darkseid's creation of Apocalypse, the Father Box, is of course going to be ultra powerful and make anybody submit to it. But it's not just that. It's not just because he is being forced to make Superman snap, but he also enjoys the torture. You know, Brainiac is a sadistic robot, android, whatever he is. So he also takes a little bit of joy in this, even creating duplicates, clones of himself to do his dirty work. We also find out though, because these clones are hyper intelligent just like him, they also have free will, even if it is more limited and under his control. Because as one of the clones go out to say, in regard to the Kryptonian meteorite that they're using to keep Superman docile and that they're using to do surgery on him, to torture him, some of us thought perhaps Kryptonite might be a more efficient name for the substance. But the original Brainiac just makes him cut off his own tongue for speaking out of line, and the clone does as much. But Brainiac continues on, saying now directly to Superman, Kal-El, I've read your brain. I've seen your memories, every second of your sad little life. Such a tragedy what happened to Krypton. I can see why you think you want to save these poor humans from their own self-destruction. But I've been here among these humans since 1938. So believe me when I say that once you let yourself kill a few million of these helpless little sacks, you'll see that's exactly the sort of help these people deserve. Superman, though, in his own mind, completely just raging and being pushed to the brink of mental collapse, by these visions and torturous nightmares almost. Though it isn't just Superman being tortured, but also his allies in the form of Lois Lane and the other Omega Men, who it turned out the entire Omega Men organization was nothing more than a ruse, all carefully planned under Ra's al Ghul, and of course led by his daughter Talia al Ghul. But this little interaction here is actually very informative, because Talia al Ghul goes on to explain the entire plan of Lazarus and what they want to do with Superman. Because Lazarus and the Omega Men, the two organizations and groups that were fighting against each other, were always two sides of the same coin. It's all been a lie. Heck, the entire world is a lie. All life on Earth is corrupted, down to their very atoms. If left untended, humanity will consume itself in everything it touches. So all that stands between survival and apocalypse is the hand of the undying shepherd of a man, Ra's al Ghul. Of course, making Ra's al Ghul some sort of God parallel, or more accurately, kind of like a Jesus parallel. Ra's al Ghul on Earth serving under the Omega or Darkseid, who is off in the cosmos or whatever have you. Talia continuing to say, yes, she will rule by her father's side, as they forge a new world from the ashes of the old. A new world with order, merit, resources, and a purpose for all. Of course, once they thin out the herd and kill a few useless billions, and the Superman shall lead the way. As we speak, Brainiac is dragging him brain first down. Soon that little child of Smallville will turn this planet red. And the response of Lois Lane is essentially, that will never happen. Superman is strong, not only physically with his powers and whatnot, but mentally and morally. But Talia knows this. Heck, she even says she knows him better than you ever will. The father box tells her everything. And how Superman has a breaking point, much like every other sentient creature. And once he has reached it, you will see for yourself, as his final test will be to kill both of you, both Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen. Which is a pretty tall order to ask for, but one that might come into reality if Brainiac continues to torture Superman and break his mind. As we cut over to day 5 now, yes, 5 continuous days of full-on mental torture, making Superman relive his worst and most violent memories. Us finding out that he has made it to phase 4. In the last hour, he has experienced and went through visions and situations of killing 8,577 Peacemakers. But this time it seems it's different, as it seems like he has woken up into real life, breaking out of whatever illusions or visions that they were forcing upon him, and instantly going to grab Brainiac by the neck, starting to squeeze the life out of him, confronting him about what he said before about killing millions of people. But Superman isn't going to turn out like Brainiac. No, he's not going to kill millions, just one, just him. But before he can just squeeze the life out of Brainiac, choke and end this psychopath once and for all, suddenly he stops himself. Not because anybody forced him to, but this is just not him. This is not who he is. Even going on to turn to the other Brainiacs, the clones present, not only asking for help, but saying that he sees the way that the main Brainiac treats them. Basically prisoners just like him. You deserve better. You deserve liberty. Maybe if we work together, we can. But before he can finish his sentence, he is just then hit with a wave of incapacitating pain. Because as it so seems, the entire thing was another vision, another fake program. It's almost like Inception, you know, he never really woke up. He was just dreaming about waking up. Yet in reality, he is still under Kryptonite and on the operating table with Brainiac fully intact. And you would think because Brainiac didn't actually almost get killed, he would be happy about this. But no, that is what he wants. He wants Superman to snap and kill him. Push him far enough where he abandons his morals and resorts to murder, because that would be the logical thing to do. Superman has gotten captured and is being tortured. If you had as much power as Superman did, why wouldn't you attack and end your captors if you had the chance? In the very fact and reasoning that Superman isn't doing this, it's what's really tearing Brainiac apart, as when we move over to day 12 now, Brainiac and his whole operation is completely stumped. Superman has not progressed past phase 4. And to make matters even worse, his clones or subordinates actually take the words that Superman said to them to heart. How they deserve better, they deserve freedom and liberty. Unsurprisingly though, the main Brainiac doesn't see it that way and instead decides to cut all of them to pieces, killing all of them one by one. Brainiac though also gives credit where credit is due, speaking to Superman, saying that it is a privilege to pillage the brain of a being such as this, a man who rewrites hardwiring and code with his whispers and inspires a rebellion in a pack of walking toasters. But no matter what and no matter who has to die, he will eventually progress and snap and break. Speaking of breaking, we move back over to the prison facility where Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen are being held. Well, held, but not for long, as Lois Lane's father comes to the rescue, breaking them out. Her father being a retired general within Lazarus itself, so he pulled some strings and was able to get into prison undetected and allowing him to break them out here. But before they can leave, there's someone else they have to save. Someone who, if they don't save, could literally spell the end for the entire planet as they know it. Of course, referring to Kal-El or Superman. Though in another one of Superman's visions or dreams or whatever you want to call it, we see he has progressed from his home planet Krypton to now on the Kent's farm. Of course, reliving the time where Lazarus took him away from the Kent's family and essentially started the downfall of his life here on Earth. Except here now, Kal-El has had enough. Whereas before he ran away from the Lazarus trying to capture him, here he says no. not anymore, deciding now to destroy them and everything that they have here. Even Ra's al Ghul himself makes an appearance, telling Superman, "Bravo, I knew you could do it. You were sent here for a reason, to save the planet. But as you can see, you can't do that without a little bit of blood on your hands. After everything you've endured, you deserve this. To free yourself like this, you deserve liberty." And you know what Superman's response to all of this is? Yeah, to literally pluck his heart out of his very chest, killing Ra's al Ghul, or at least in his fake program reality that he is in. And from here, everything starts to collide and happens at once. Because back over in the actual reality, we see that Lois Lane and the group have found Superman, even shooting Brainiac through the chest. But even as they try to unhook Superman from all this machinery, they're still in a very fortified and heavily defensive base, meaning they're not simply just out of time, but things could turn deadly at any second, as we see that exactly happening. Her father being stabbed through the skull. Talia al Ghul herself is back now with a squad of Peacemakers. Of course, their only salvation in this situation is for Superman himself to wake up and save all of them. Except right now, that might be the worst thing to happen, because inside of his head, Cal is almost reaching his breaking point. Talking with the programmed vision of the Kents, Brainiac finally decided to switch his programming, because yes, instead of just pushing Superman to anger for revenge and to lash out, he's seen that that wouldn't make him break. So instead, he decides to play on his heartstrings. The Kents going on to tell Cal that this should have never have happened. We should have been together, except Lazarus took that from us. They took you. We were wrong before to tell you to run. There is no safe place for you anywhere on this planet. Not unless you fight for it. Cal, of course, continuing on saying that he's been trying, but everyone keeps just telling him who he is supposed to be. But the Kents just continue saying, "We know, Cal. We see you. We've seen it all. So believe us when we tell you that we are not only proud of you, but what you have done here. So just keep doing it, son. Get out there and kill them all." And with that, Superman snaps and wakes up, busting through the machinery and Kryptonite keeping him in place, and now for the first time waking up to real reality. Except here, he says nothing, not a word. His body almost moving on pure instinct, pure determination and focus, grabbing Brainiac by the neck just like before. Except here, it doesn't seem like he's about to stop, like he's about to spare Brainiac and save everybody else. And even when Soul, the artificial intelligence in his suit, comes back online, even the suit itself cannot reach or stop Kal-El. Superman at this point has been pushed so far, 2 weeks of continuous torture, until seemingly it worked. He broke, he snapped, and is going to do exactly what his parents said. Get out there and kill them all, as the entire facility, the building, just explodes from Superman's rage and Superman's power. And immediately we pick up in the perspective of Superman Clark Kent, or Kal-El, as he's not really Clark Kent here in this universe yet, but he's just as unaware and confused as we are, because it wasn't his own doing that took him here in the middle of Kansas. No, it was Soul, the artificial intelligence in his suit. As Cal even goes on to say, Brainiac clawed his way deep inside of my head, pushing me to become Ra's al Ghul's new instrument of destruction. And the kicker is it almost worked. My hand was at Brainiac's throat, and I was squeezing, getting ready to kill him, take him out once and for all, until Soul, the artificial intelligence, as I was just saying, did what he has been doing for years now. He saved me, because potentially if he were to do that, if he were to kill Brainiac in this moment, that would just create a domino effect. Superman slowly going down a path where he is consumed by his rage, unable to control himself, and then being okay with murder, destruction, etc. It's kind of like Batman in the main continuity. You know, people say, why doesn't he just kill the Joker? The worst of the worst, you know, just him maybe, and then the rest you can keep your no-kill rule. Well, it's just a slippery slope. Once he starts to then, what's stopping him from going further if he sees that it works? Same thing with Superman here. If he starts with killing Brainiac or Ra's al Ghul, then he could just wish all of his other problems and the lesser evils, the Peacemakers and whatever have you, let's just kill them as well. And then it just goes on from there. But this isn't the first time that Soul, his suit, has saved him. As it cut over 5 years beforehand, we see many more occurrences, this time specifically after he ran away from the Kents. Or not really ran away, but he was forced to leave the Kents because Lazarus came down knocking and was going to destroy everything. He decided at that moment to be done with humanity. He has no obligation to help or be among these people. Heck, he's not even the same species as them. Superman deciding at this moment to isolate himself, almost inside of a random volcano where most people would die just from the heat alone. Though Superman is fine here, even going on to say, I'm not going anywhere near those Earth people again. There's nothing I need out there, and you know it. I don't have to eat, I barely sleep, and I don't even need a roof over my head. I'll be just fine in places where they're not. Though Soul goes on to speak logically to Cal, saying, yes, you may not be human or of them, and you may not require the same things that humans need, as in food, sleep, and other shelter like that, but there's one thing you do have in common with them. You were not made to live alone. You're still a sentient creature, a social creature. And yes, this anxiety and sense of defiance are not uncommon for a child the age of Kal-El here, yet he is unlike any other child of this world. All the more reason Superman here has to avoid becoming untethered to the planet's natural inhabitants, because it would be so easy to wind up like Homelander, who grew up being tested on, isolated, and unable to form actual genuine human and social connections. But while they're here and them taking advantage of the moment, because of his powers and abilities and whatever have you under a yellow sun, Superman literally needs lava to bathe him instead of just normal water. Superman, though, finally decides to give interacting with humanity another shot. You know, at least while he's on this planet and unable to escape, he might as well try another time to blend in and just live among them. Though with his power set and his abilities, obviously he could do anything he wanted. He could reach the highest levels of earthly society. He's not just a lowly farmer's boy like he was back on Krypton, but here he can actually achieve the social advancement his parents were denied, as one would be able to do, being not only one of the most powerful people on this planet, but maybe even the universe. But Kal here dreams of none of that. The symbol, the shield crest on his chest, his parents lived with that their entire lives, the symbol on their chest, so he's going to be sure he'll die with it on his. As here in the Absolute Universe, the symbol, the S on his chest, doesn't just mean his family's crest and logo. Here on this version of Krypton, it represented the social class he was in. He was a part of the Laborers Guild, which is essentially the farmer and other lowly jobs inside of their society. Clark, on the other hand, wears it with pride, saying there's only one place a son of the Redlands belongs, and that's in the sun, as he is then working manual jobs, helping people farm, etc. Though it becomes abundantly clear that not only is Clark just a kid, but he's just not used to all of this change and how to adapt to it, as while he is working, moving along, trying to get through his day, even unintentionally he starts to hurt the people around him, as he goes on to give someone a handshake, burning her hand with the heat of the sun, because of course being in the sun, it charges him up like a battery, so he is hot to the touch. Though this commotion and spectacle just draws unnecessary attention as the Peacemakers come in to make sure everybody gets back to work, even going as far as to abuse and hit the other workers here to get them back moving along, which of course angers Superman in the moment. And in the case of Superman just not knowing his own strength on this new alien world, he tries to get the Peacemaker to stop attacking, but instead rips his arm out of his socket, which just puts into perspective that he is truly living in a world of cardboard here. And especially being a child, it would be so easy for him just to mow down people as if they were nothing but flies. But he doesn't. He zooms off and going back to another peak, another mountain, just to soak and think about everything that has happened to him, how he didn't mean to do that. He didn't even know his own strength. Soul even going on to try to explain the situation to him, saying that every day he is here absorbing the energy of the Earth's yellow sun, his abilities, his strength multiplies. And how if he wants to continue being here, he has to learn to be especially careful around humans. Clark, though, just has one thing on his mind. Did he accidentally kill that person? He didn't mean to rip his arm off, and he could bleed to death because of such. But with Lazarus having advanced medical facilities, realistically, he's probably fine, you know, relatively at least. But Clark, on the other hand, thinks maybe he should have died. He's seen the abuse that not only happened in that moment, but that Lazarus, the soldiers, partake in. Isn't this suffering and death what the Peacemaker and Lazarus deserves, with their big guns and fancy armors? Kal, if he really wanted to, he can kill all of them in a single day. And how if he just fought back and stopped them for good, it would be so simple and easy. Just like his father back on Krypton when he slaughtered all of the beasts, the animals in the mine to protect the fields. Though once again, Soul just tries to think logically and objectively, trying to reason with, saying humans may be primitive and with a shocking capacity for cruelty toward one another, but they're not animals. If Jor-El and Laura were here, his parents, they would tell him the same thing, that he does not have the right to be judge, jury, and executioner simply because he can. That's the thing though, if they were here, but they're not. They're dead, all of Krypton is. And what does this artificial intelligence thinks it knows anyway? He's not even real. Though Soul has a pretty good rebuttal as to what his purpose is and why. As he goes on to say, you're correct, I'm not real. I was made to protect you and remind you of who you are. And this I will continue to do, for there is no one else who can. And in this moment, with all of the conflicting thoughts, reasonings, and paths he can go down, Kal-El just needs a moment to collect his thoughts. He needs a bit of quiet, isolation, maybe even solitude, if you will, as we see the crystals form around him, making his own mini version of the Fortress of Solitude, in which for this absolute Superman, this is almost a perfect rendition of the Fortress of Solitude for his character here, because he has no home. His original Krypton blew up, that's gone. On Earth, there's nowhere safe that he can go and nowhere that he won't get kicked out of. Kansas, where he met the Kents, that was only temporary, and everywhere else has been the same sort of story. Yet here in this moment completely closed off, he can finally have his own solitude for himself, as when we cut over to the present, that's exactly the same thing he's doing to this day. But once breaking out, Soul activates again, asking him, Kal, are you well? In which Superman, thinking back the events of not only the previous time with Brainiac, all the torture that he has endured, but even his time on Earth, he simply says, no. In which he decides to go back to the one place on Earth since his time here where he actually felt okay, and that was with the Kens on their farm when he first arrived. Them at this point not being here as that was years ago, and everything looking worse and seeing better days. Though in this moment, the artificial intelligence soul actually apologizes to Kal-El, as he goes on to say, "I am sorry that I was never able to provide you with the community I knew you needed. Instead, you've had to spend these years on the run always alone. I failed in my purpose, the only one your mother programmed me with. I failed to protect you." And maybe before, Superman, years ago, would have agreed. But at this point, after time thinking about it, the years of experience he has had, he goes on to say, "For the first time in 6 years, I can say this with clarity and certainty, you're wrong. I was never without protection and never without care and guidance, never lacking for a community, nor was he ever truly alone." As we see the journey from Krypton itself to Earth, the time and months spent on the ship itself, him arriving on Earth and every moment in between, Soul has been there every step of the way. And how at this point, he is more than just a rocket ship or some artificial intelligence, some object just to aid Clark. He is more akin to family. Superman even going as far as to call it his big brother from Krypton, which is a really, really interesting development here because on one hand, while Soul isn't actually a being, he is as close as you can get without being the actual thing. And on the other hand too, I wonder if we're going to ever get a absolute Supergirl or any other survivors from Krypton, because in Supergirl's case, generally she's supposed to be the loose cannon, the hot-headed one, the one who is more prone to just lashing out in her emotions, especially on Earth with her heightened powers, yet Kal-El kind of already fills that role, so I wonder just how much she is going to be and how different from that. But in this moment, Superman isn't alone, as he has other company here, with Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen finally arriving back and them rendezvousing. And in this rare moment of downtime and not, fighting for their lives or anything like that, they, as in Superman and Lois Lane, have the time to formally introduce each other. Superman at first going on to say that yes, he's sorry for her father's loss and death at the hands of Brainiac in the lair, but all he can say and promise her that those responsible will face justice. Them now being in first name basis, Superman going on to say that my name is Kal-El of Krypton, and then Agent Lane going on to say that he can just call her Lois. And with everything cleared up here, Lois goes on to say that they should really get going and move from this location because it won't take Lazarus long to come searching for them and find them wherever they go. As she goes on to even ask Superman, does he have a hidden safe place anywhere? But, the safe place is Soul on his back right now. The almost living cape and big brother, as Superman put it before. But Superman continues saying, Soul brought us here to help me remember. And you're right, Ra's al Ghul will never stop. He'll do whatever he can to bend me to his will, no matter who gets hurt in the process. Which is why we can't leave. Because there's no point. Ra's al Ghul is already here. There's no point in running more, as they will just be tracked down and found. They have to stand their ground and fight now, end this potentially once and for all. As even Ra's al Ghul himself has the same idea, deciding now that he has Superman here where he wants him, he wants the entire town of Smallville surrounded and quarantined. No one gets in and nothing gets out. And for the actual people here of Smallville, he goes on to say to put the boot of Lazarus on their necks, burn down their houses, defile their churches, cast them into mud like pigs, and stripped of any decency. Kill anyone who dares to think about defying us in as loud and appalling manner as possible. He wants it to be a big thing. He wants it to be a spectacle for everyone to hear. Because as he continues saying, fill this land with the screams and suffering until Superman has no choice but to come for us for all of his alien fury. Because he wants the rage to the one thing Superman has been trying to keep back and not just push out into the world is the same thing that Ra's al Ghul wants. The one emotion that is most natural and forthcoming to him with all of the things that he has experienced from Krypton to here on Earth. Ra's al Ghul wants him to stop holding back, as he even goes on to say, and once Superman is adequately enraged, I will handle his baptism personally. By the hand of Ra's al Ghul, he will be redeemed, which if Ra's gets his way, Superman will fall in line and become his most powerful asset and ally. But to get to that process, he needs to bring in everything, as we see just an army of military might, power, and mechs just roaming through Smallville, getting ready for a ginormous showdown and putting Smallville under siege. Yes, this is essentially what is the end of this giant overarching arc that absolute Superman has been going on and fighting against. As in the present, we see Kal-El here, Superman, almost in a dreamlike state, him seeing his homeworld, Krypto, his parents that are still alive, even though in the present, in the real world, they should be dead. We see him go on to narrate saying his mouth is full of blood, his eyes are scabbed closed. He can feel a blade searing hot and slicing through him again and again, as he looks upon his mother and father saying, I'm doing what Krypton did before me, I'm dying, as we see Ra's al Ghul just plunge a Kryptonite full-on sword through his midsection. Because yes, as you can clearly see during this battle of Kansas, Superman is losing almost to a laughable extent. Ra's al Ghul going to continue to almost gloat to the dying boy here, saying, I told you that you would kneel. Now gather up your guts, and when you rise, rise as this world's redeemer, ready to sweep across the planet. My great red red storm of judgment. All that you must do now to take your place as Earth's new savior is acknowledge your maker. Acknowledge Ra's al Ghul as your loving father, which obviously paints a kind of parallel, making Ra's al Ghul the god, if you will, in his own mind, and Superman here, Kal-El, would be his new son that would save Earth from his weakness and restart everything. But the only real response that Superman has here is to quite literally spit in his face, going on to say, if there is a god, you ain't him. And in response to that, Ra's al Ghul simply just plunges his sword into Superman's hand, splitting his palm open. As he continues to say, these humans, these people, are sheep chasing themselves off of a cliff. A meek child from Kansas could never save them, but an enraged scion of a doomed alien world could. Of course, being the rage that he's been trying to turn Superman into. As he then grabs his face and plunges it into the Kryptonite energy of the sword, searing Superman's flesh, Ra's al Ghul continues saying that I have fathered 97 sons, but not one proved worthy of living, let alone standing by my side. So either you become the storm, become Ra's al Ghul's rage, or you can join your brothers in the grave. And I mean, this right here, just 97 sons, but not a single one of them were deemed worthy. I wonder what Talia al Ghul's childhood was like and why she, out of everyone, was deemed, worthy enough to live and stand by his side. I hope we get that explored later on because that could be super interesting. Now, here is where the giant shift in, almost downfall, if you will, starts to happen and occur, because as Ra's al Ghul goes on to command Brainiac to free Superman of the encumbers and earthly tethers in the form of, his friends and allies and people that he trusts here, essentially killing them using Soul's previous red, now purple crystals, we find out that he is not only still alive, but not fully taken over, as he goes on to say, no, I will not be party to murder. Because while Brainiac is super intelligent and did take over Soul's entire system, embedded himself so deep inside of Soul's source code that he will never truly be free of Brainiac, that also works two ways, meaning that Soul can also see into Brainiac's, entire system and past as well, even calling out his original model number from his origin, being one of the many different Brainiacs that were created to essentially be a slave to the higher Brainiac's will. Soul continues saying, you are right, you have irrevocably corrupted my programming, but the last dust of Krypton will never belong to the likes of you, because given the options between being a weapon of mass destruction, death, and war, or taking himself out of the equation permanently, he decides to choose the latter, giving Kal-El his final goodbyes, calling him his brother, before permanently deleting all of his operating systems and basically ceasing to exist, killing himself in the process. Which, to no surprise, makes Superman just absolutely rageful and hysterical, watching right in front of him another member, the last member or memory of his last planet, Krypton, die right in front of him. He decides to stop holding back, ripping the Kryptonite sword from his palm and unleashing a very powerful blast before declaring that Kal-El of Krypton is already dead, which to him, it kind of is. He already lost his planet, his people, the last remnant being his suit. The very advanced intelligence suit is gone. Nothing tethering him to Krypton even exists anymore on this planet. So in his own mind, Kal-El of Krypton is gone and dead, as he just unleashes a brutal blast of his heat vision, just completely incinerating and blowing everything up. And unsurprisingly, Ra's al Ghul, being the beast of a man that he is completely unfazed by this. If anything, he is excited that Superman is finally showing some spirit and not holding back as much. But still, Superman is weakened in current state here. Ra's al Ghul just knocks him back dozens of feet, crashing into debris away. Superman going on to say that Ra's al Ghul is a volcano of a man with a sword forged from my dead planet. Yet I am a sun-starved child with broken knuckles and bleeding eyes. Soul would know what to do in this moment, but Soul is dead, as he's just been grabbed and catched by just a random Peacemaker that is piloting a suit, thinking that, he's doing the right thing. He's captured Superman and doing what he was trained to do in his job. But keep in mind, this is happening in front of everybody, from the citizens of Kansas in the resisting force and the whole other army of Peacemakers here as well. There's nobody really wanting to take the first shot and starting a bloodbath between the two. But as Ra's al Ghul finally gets back on his feet and confronts the Peacemaker who grabbed Superman, he says, what is the meaning of this? Who allowed you to lay a hand on my son? As he just rips the thing apart, getting ready to absolutely just incinerate the man inside for even daring to interrupt his battle and his fight, until he is saved by Superman swooping in, which just completely enrages Ra's al Ghul. As he goes on to say, while continuing to beat on Superman, your weakness is appalling. You rescue your own persecutor? I suppose you were right all along. You were no son of mine. As he decides enough is enough, the siege of Smallville ends here, giving his Peacemakers direct orders to kill every single one of the civilians in resisting force of Smallville to town, until Superman finally realizes that, this is the end game, this is it, deciding that if he lets all of the people here, the innocents, survive and live, that he will do anything Ra's al Ghul says, going as far to even rip the symbol and crest from his chest of his people in Homeworld, saying that this was a symbol of my people, but I don't even have a people anymore. I am the son of nowhere and nothing, which is kind of super super depressing if you think about it. Of course, Ra's al Ghul couldn't care any less. He just wants Superman's submission and for him to become his new weapon, telling him to bow down and get on his knees. Though Superman goes on to say that if it'll save Smallville, sure, I'll bow, gravel, whatever you want. But, and here's a big but, you are just going to kill these people anyway, aren't you? Regardless of him submitting to Ra's al Ghul or anything in between. As Kal-El continues saying, on Krypton, I wore the crest of the Labor Guild. It was seen as a mark of shame, but my parents taught me to wear it with pride. We were the children of the sun, they said, those who made their way with their own two hands, before using and activating the last bits and pieces of his suit, which was the advanced AI and almost the nanotech-like bits, and forming a weapon with it to attack Ra's al Ghul here. Superman, of course, knowing that his submission and wanting to work with Ra's al Ghul was just going to end in nothing more than more death, war, and utter extinction of innocent people. So he chooses the same path like Soul did. He'd rather potentially die and end this battle with his death than submit to something like that. Which, just then, Ra's al Ghul decides to allow his peacemakers to fire at will to take out all of the resistance group here, which the peacemakers having way more military training and advanced armor and weapons that it really wouldn't be a battle and more of a slaughter on their end. Until it is one of their own, a peacemaker, the same one that Superman saved and almost inspired by his actions, steps in between everybody here saying, no, I'm from Oklahoma. I didn't sign up to shoot farmers or fight wars in Kansas. Did any of you? Which kind of gets everybody to realize that, yeah, this entire situation is kind of messed up. You know, they were here to stop Superman, an alien that they were told was evil and could be bad for humanity at whole, not gunning down innocent farmers of a small town, which kind of shows you indirectly Superman just inspiring and giving hope to those who previously his worst enemies and wanted him dead in the first place. So while the civilians of Smallville are safe for now, Superman isn't out of the clear just yet as their battle just continues on. Superman using his new makeshift sword-like weapon and fighting against the Ra's al Ghul with everything he has. With Superman making his last stand against his greatest evil and greatest adversary so far. And even so, we see a bunch of quotes and sayings from everybody who has helped him or been on this journey with him, from Soul, his parents, Lois. Every person, big or small, who has helped Superman during this entire run is symbolically with him during this final stand and final clash in battle. Until we see one final vision between him on Krypton with his parents, Krypto, whatever. You can almost imagine this as a two sides in war within himself. Like, yes, he could either give in and give up and join his parents in the dead world of Krypton and lose everything that he has been building for, purposely or not, or he can keep pushing forward, as even here he says, I'm ready to go home with you. But his parents say, yes, we miss you terribly, Kal-El, more than you can ever imagine, and we always will. But you are already home. Earth, of course, being his new home, as that side wins out. And even in the present, he wins, shattering the Kryptonite sword. And Superman, for the first time, he's done the impossible. He has bested Ra's al Ghul through pure tenacity and determination and willpower. It is now Ra's al Ghul who is kneeling to Superman, Kal-El, who, as Ra's al Ghul even says himself, I kneel to you, you who truly are a Superman, the son of the demon. Now all that is left is for you to strike me down and become who you were meant to be. You want to protect this world? Well, then protect it from me. I've killed more people than the plague, torn the heads off of children. Bury your blade into my heart, or I will kill again. Which is a pretty convincing argument in the opposite direction. Most people would say why they deserve to live and why they shouldn't, be executed. But Ra's al Ghul knows that if Superman gives in and actually goes through with this will just set him down the path of being what he wanted in the first place. As killing the man who has basically taken everything from him would also take the last thing he has, his hope and tenacity to keep pushing forward and do better, as it's left ambiguous what exactly happens from there to here. But we move over to Pakistan, the same town that the innocent civilians were slaughtered by the Peacemaker. We see Superman now holding Ra's al Ghul completely bound, beaten, and destroyed, and just straight up giving him to the people here as a not a peace offering, but a option for justice. As Superman goes on to say, this is the man responsible for the murder of 23 people in these streets. The atrocities committed by Lazarus were carried out under his direct order. His name is Ra's al Ghul, and you must see that he stands trial for his crimes. Of course, the people are grateful that the man who has killed, some of their people can be put to justice. They go on to ask him what is his name and who do they have to thank for this gift. And even Superman in this moment, much like all the times before, is slightly unsure. Like, he is no longer Kal-El of Krypton. That whole side of him is dead and gone, as he proclaimed himself. Yet the only other identity and person that he has grown into on Earth is this new Superman being that he is unwillingly taking the role of. As we do a time jump now, weeks later, Smallville is still healing from the absolute war and devastation of their town, but it's slowly starting to rebuild and getting back to normal. The people here are nothing but resilient. And even as Superman goes on to narrate and say nothing in this town will ever be normal again, Lois and Jimmy's broadcast from before eventually got through, and the world is finally seeing what Lazarus did here and what exactly they truly are capable of. Talia al Ghul may have slipped away during the battle, but her father's company has been ruined, while Ra's al Ghul himself sits in a Pakistani jail charged with a long list of crimes. Meanwhile, Superman himself, he has gathered every last speck of the Sunstone Crystal, and of course his cape, but it's all just functionless. It's silent, a lifeless machine. Soul is truly gone and destroyed. And even in the weeks after the entire battle, he's been trying to put off one thing, during his healing process and basking in the sun. Eventually, it leads him to Smallville Senior Living, where he wants to finally see his Earth mother, if you will, Martha Kent. Though unfortunately for him, he is too late. She has already passed. The lady goes on to give him a box. Something that Martha Kent, before she passed, literally last night in her sleep, something that she's been working on non-stop. It is the most clear-headed and cohesive that a dementia patient like her, or whatever she was dealing with, has been in years. Like, she knew exactly what she was doing. And how, yes, memories come and go for someone like Martha Kent. Dementia is cruel like that. Some memories and moments slipped away for good, but she never forgot her late husband, Jonathan Kent, and of course, Superman Kal-El here. And how she wanted him to have this. This is what she's been working on for weeks. And now, unfortunately, yes, she didn't quite get it finished, but Martha Kent said he would know what it meant. And in the box, it's literally the threads of a new suit. The suit symbolizing not only the